Chapter 407, Sacrifice of the Order of the Phoenix's First Generation. The moment Charm's class ended, Neville sprang from his seat and bolted out of the classroom. A ripple of chatter broke out among the remaining students, everyone speculating about Azkaban and its grim mysteries. Harry lifted his head, intending to call after Neville, but his shoulders slumped instead. Something had clearly put him out of sorts. "Why don't we ask the all-knowing Ryan?" Ron offered hastily, spotting his friend's sudden gloom. Harry shook his head. "And where would we even find him?" Ron shrugged. He'd long ago noticed how Ryan, despite his striking good looks, had a knack for disappearing from sight whenever classes were in session. "Exactly my point. He's never around when you need him. He waltzes into class late and slips out early, all without anyone noticing." Hermione looked around the room. "He can't have gone far. I'm sure he's still here somewhere." "Trust Hermione and Luna," Harry said, a small smile breaking through. "They'd spot Ryan in a crowd faster than anyone." Ron crossed his arms, still unconvinced. "I'm telling you, I saw him leave. He wasn't even in this room." Harry grinned, eyebrows arched. "Since when did you become such a sharp-eyed sentry? Come on." He strode toward Hermione and Luna, who were already gathering their books. Hermione paused as Harry caught up. "Yes?" Harry's tone turned earnest. "I need to ask Ryan something important. Have you seen him?" Hermione exchanged a look with Luna. "Follow us. We'll lead you right to him." As they headed down the corridor, Harry felt a flicker of hope. If anyone could get answers, it was Ryan, assuming he hadn't slipped away again. "Can you lend him to me for a moment?" Harry's request barely left his lips when, in a flash of light, a strikingly handsome young man, like someone stepped right out of a gilded portrait, appeared at Hermione's side. "Who is that?" someone shrieked. Instantly, the entire classroom erupted. Girls clutched their chests, hearts racing as if they'd seen a magical creature. "My heart, stop pounding," one whimpered. "Lisa, help me stay upright," another cried. "How am I supposed to face him like this? Where's my concealer?" "No, he's Ryan Smith. Didn't he come up as my perfect match at the sorting? Why can't I remember him?" Harry stumbled backward, stunned. His normally composed classmates had transformed into a gaggle of lovesick admirers in seconds. Even witches strolling past the windows froze, their curiosity piqued by the commotion. But before Harry could brace himself for full-scale pandemonium, tranquility returned as quickly as it had vanished. The girls, poised to duel over Ryan, blinked and resumed their seats, utterly composed. The onlookers outside shrugged, whispering something about an update from Azkaban, and continued on their way, leaving Harry alone with the enigmatic Ryan Smith. "You just used magic similar to the forgetfulness charm?" Ron took a shaky step forward, swallowing hard as he spoke. Ryan inclined his head, eyes calm. "Not exactly. I merely concealed my presence." Ron's face twisted in confusion. "Their subconscious minds fill in the gaps automatically. Why would you have to do anything?" Ryan blinked, as if surprised by Ron's question. "Because I can choose who remembers me and who doesn't. If I want to be forgotten, I simply shut off my information. If I want someone to keep me in mind, I let them. That's why you and Ginny have always known I exist, while everyone else has no clue who I am." Harry and Ginny shared a knowing look. They'd understood Ryan's power from the start, only Ron still hadn't quite caught on. Ryan shrugged and turned back to Ron. "Ignore him," he said lightly. "He'll catch up eventually." At that moment, Hermione stepped forward and gently took Ryan's right arm. "We need to prepare," she said, her voice firm. "You know what questions they're going to ask." "Exactly the question I was waiting for," Ryan said with a knowing smile. "You should all be surprised by Neville's behavior," he continued, leaning back in his chair. "This all traces back to the Ministry of Magic. After Neville's parents, both decorated Aurors, were driven mad, their achievements were quietly erased, and their service records buried. Even their pension was nearly wiped out," he added. "If Dumbledore hadn't quietly intervened, there'd have been nothing left for the Longbottom family. And it was Voldemort himself who orchestrated their downfall," Ryan explained. "The wizard responsible for their madness is locked up in Azkaban." Ryan sighed, shaking his head. "The old Dumbledore, the one who shunned power and feared politics, always struck me as dull. The current version, willing to take risks and wield authority, is infinitely more interesting. Had he acted sooner, Britain's magical community would be thriving by now. Hermione raised an eyebrow. But how did Neville know it was Voldemort who broke into Azkaban? Elementary deduction, Ryan replied. My father was put in charge of transferring the lesser prisoners to a new facility. By the time he arrived, the old island prison was in ruins. The Ministry, desperate to save money, allowed the structure and the most dangerous inmates to perish under the guise of an accident. As Professor Flitwick noted, Azkaban simply vanished overnight. Meeting Ryan's calm, unwavering gaze, Ron felt his cheeks flush. Only now did he realize how much the Ministry, and even some of their own mentors, had kept hidden from them. Harry leaned back, staring into the flickering flames. If we ever caught those Death Eaters, you just know some people would want to kill them on the spot. Hermione's eyes narrowed. If I were in charge, I'd petition the Ministry to amend the statutes and then apply to become the official executioner, she said crisply. That way, any punishment would be carried out by law. Killing is always wrong when it's done in the moment. Harry frowned. But the law already punishes wizards who make mistakes. You can't forbid every miscast spell during an arrest, but once you've got your suspect in custody, it's the court's job to decide their fate. Ryan couldn't hide a wry smile. After all this time together, Hermione remained as idealistic as ever, just as she had been in the original timeline. Aside from her enhanced magical prowess, nothing had changed. He leaned forward. You're wrong. Sometimes vengeance for those we love is the truest justice. Harry's eyes flashed. So you'd have us lock Voldemort up instead of killing him when we catch him? That's different, Hermione snapped, though her triumphant glance at Ryan betrayed her confidence. She folded her arms and held her ground. The debate crackled between them like the firelight, each convinced that their vision of justice was the only right one. Hermione bristled. Okay, don't lecture people about kindness if you've never felt their pain firsthand. Ryan shot her a reproachful look. Hermione crossed her arms and pouted. With a flick of his wand, an enchanted photograph shimmered into view between them. In it, a half-dozen witches and wizards stood in a loose circle, heads tilted upward, some waving, others toasting with their goblets. This, Ryan said quietly, is the very first group photo of the Order of the Phoenix. See that fellow with the wild white hair and spectacles? Daedalus Diggle. You know him well, Harry. He let the spell drift over the rest of the faces. No need to introduce Dumbledore, McGonagall, Hagrid, or the others who are still with us. I want you to meet those who didn't survive. The image shifted to a young witch smiling confidently. Marlene McKinnon. 2 weeks after this was taken, she and her entire family were murdered by Death Eaters. It changed again, showing a gaunt, haunted-looking wizard. Benji Fenwick, another tragedy, only fragments of his body were ever recovered. Next, a stern-looking man with sad eyes appeared. Edgar Bones, brother to Amelia Bones, our current Minister of Magic. His whole family was captured, and none of them lived. The photo blurred into Ocaradoc Dearborn's face. He disappeared 6 months after this portrait was snapped. No trace of him has ever been found. Finally, Gideon Prewitt's warm, determined smile filled the frame. Then, just as silently as it had come, the enchanted picture dissolved into nothing, leaving the three friends standing in an uneasy silence as the weight of those lost lives settled around them. It had taken 5 Death Eaters to bring him down, and his brother Fabian too. Ron, she added quietly, you shouldn't have found out about your mother's brothers like this. She flipped the photograph over. This is Dorcas Meadows, she said. Voldemort killed her with his own hand. As Ryan read each name aloud, something remarkable happened. In the old black-and-white images, the faces came to life. One alumnus lifted a mug in salute, another raised a gloved hand in a silent toast. Each gesture felt like a final farewell, an unspoken promise that they would not be forgotten. Chapter 184, The Conspiracy That Ended in Vain. After Ryan's words faded into silence, Ron let out a dry chuckle. My mum and her 2 brothers never got along, he said, voice low. I've never even heard their names or seen a single photograph of them at home. Ryan reached out and rested a hand on Ron's shoulder, an unusual gesture of comfort. They did care for each other once, he said quietly. Your mother just can't bear to talk about it. Losing loved ones hurt her too much. He paused, his gaze steady. I was wrong to think otherwise. Hermione stepped closer, her eyes glistening. Ryan unfolded a worn photograph and held it up. "This," he whispered, "is Neville's mother." Hermione's breath caught. The woman in the picture had Neville's warm, round features exactly, the same gentle smile, the same kind eyes. In that moment, Hermione understood Ryan's purpose in sharing the photo, to show her how, in this world, justice and recognition often come only in death, and that bittersweet sense of fairness arrives when it can do the least good. Harry stared at the photograph in disbelief. The Ministry's laws are so absurd sometimes. Ron leaned in to take a closer look. "You know the rule. Any wizard who casts an unforgivable curse without authorization goes straight to Azkaban for life," Harry snorted. "And yet those same unforgivable curse offenders get the exact same treatment as the Death Eaters. Families destroyed, countless lives ruined, and all they receive is a stretched-out sentence behind bars. It doesn't add up." Ron's face grew solemn. "Even Dumbledore and your father don't seem to think it's a problem." Harry's eyes burned as he tapped the picture. Every single person who died in that photo was one of their own. The Ministry has changed so many laws in recent months, but this one they've left untouched. Ron put a reassuring hand on Harry's shoulder. "Neville warned you you'd understand, didn't he?" Harry's jaw clenched. "If it were up to me, I'd hunt them down myself and make them pay." "Harry," Ron shook his head, his grip firm but gentle. "You don't have to shoulder this alone. You've got Dumbledore and Professor Riddle ready to face Voldemort. There's no need for you to take that risk." Harry looked away, voice low. "Those Death Eaters in Azkaban are disarmed, helpless. Voldemort, he's nothing like them." Harry adjusted the last floating photo on the wall and straightened up with a satisfied nod. "You know, I beat Voldemort in my first year," he said, a spark of pride in his eyes. "In just a couple of months, this potion course will be over, and then I'll be back to full strength. I was confident even back then that I could take him down." He brushed Ron's hand away as if to emphasize his point. Ron blinked, then glanced around the suddenly too quiet classroom. "Wait," Ron said. "Where did Ryan and Hermione go?" He looked to the spot where they'd been standing, where the enchanted photographs had hovered. Now both photos and friends had vanished without a trace. As the hush broke and classroom chatter resumed, Ron realized their voices were drawing stares. Without Ryan's concealment spell, every nearby student could hear them again. "I don't get it," Ron muttered. "We were hanging these up and talking just a moment ago. Why didn't anyone notice? And then everyone went silent at once." Harry rolled his eyes. "That was Ryan's doing. He cast a privacy enchantment so no one would see or hear us. Obviously, it just wore off." Ron stuck out his bottom lip. They didn't even say goodbye. Harry turned away, already thinking ahead. "Forget it. Our first priority now is to find Hagrid. We need to get all the details on Azkaban, why it's so secure, what those Dementors can do, everything." Before Ron could reply, Harry caught his arm and steered him toward the door. Ron stumbled over a desk leg, but Harry's grip held firm as they slipped out of class, off to seek answers in Hagrid's hut. Ron leaned against the cold stone wall, tapping a quill thoughtfully against his parchment. "I still have to write a letter to my dad," he said, voice low. "I want to give him some advice." Draco Malfoy arched an elegant brow. "Advice? Yeah." Ron's tone turned fierce. "Those Death Eaters, and anyone who's committed the same atrocities, they deserve to die." He stared at Draco, puzzled. "Why are you nodding along with me?" Draco's lips curved into a sly imitation of Ron's own teasing drawl. "I'm not a crybaby like you, always pining for my father, remember? You really said that." He shrugged lightly. "So what brings you here, then?" Exasperated, Ron rolled his eyes and flicked Draco's hand off his shoulder. "Isn't everyone talking about the sudden escape of prisoners from Azkaban? Of course I'm here to see what's going on." A chill wind rattled the castle windows, carrying Draco's knowing smirk. "I thought so. This reeks of Voldemort's handiwork. But before you go off to rally the Order, you still need to check in with Hagrid." "How do you know I was planning to see Hagrid?" Ron's eyebrows shot up, his expression a mix of suspicion and wonder. At that moment, he half wondered if Draco Malfoy had suddenly developed the gift of prophecy, like Harry, or if the old Malfoy line was hiding a seer among its branches. He stole a glance at Harry, hoping for a clue, but Harry's face was as unreadable as ever, and in that instant, Ron's wild theories found no easy answer. You really need to find someone you can talk this through with, Harry insisted, running a hand through his hair. Draco snorted. Oh, sure, like we dare go to Snape. Or to you, Harry. Let alone to Ron. Ron bristled. Nice to know you trust us so much. And I've got no idea where Lupin's been all day, Harry continued. Draco chuckled. Come on, only Hagrid's been hanging around, bent over Alice-Spader and Hephaestus in the house. He reached out and ruffled Ron's hair, laughing. Look at that face, speechless. Get your hand off me. Ron shoved Draco's teasing fingers away. I'm serious, Draco shrugged. Fine, but really, might it be Death Eaters? Ron's eyes went cold. That's exactly what Harry suggested. And yes, I think it's possible. Draco raised an eyebrow, scratching his ear. Even though it sounds mad, even if Harry said it, you do not laugh. Ron's voice was a low growl. I'm just keeping an open mind, Draco replied, hands raised in mock surrender. Ron balled his fist, knuckles white. I already explained why I didn't react before. All right, Draco sat back, feigning defeat. No more laughing. Harry took a steadying breath. Actually, this sort of thing has become alarmingly normal these days. After all, Draco sneered, pureblood families are all intertwined by marriage, and the Ministry of Magic is practically run by purebloods. It's only natural they'd draft loopholes in the law to protect themselves and their heirs. Ron tucked his hands into his robes, and the new decree says anyone caught using an unforgivable curse goes straight to Azkaban. But if you're a pureblood, they just slap an imperious curse on you and call it an investigation. Draco rolled his eyes at the hypocrisy. Anything else? Ron exchanged a glance with Harry. Once we've spoken to Hagrid, I'll report everything to my father. But, Draco suddenly slapped the stone wall, rattling a nearby suit of armor. Oh, I almost forgot. Flint! A painted knight on a neighboring panel let out a muffled curse. Draco grinned. That pale little bastard actually dared to insult Sir Cadogan himself. Harry raised an eyebrow. What did he do? Draco's expression turned serious. The match starts tomorrow. I'm willing to bet Flint's up to something to undermine the Ravenclaw team. Harry frowned, already dreading what might come next. No, it's actually a good thing, Draco said with a grin. It all ties back to the Azkaban debacle. Flint was planning to call in his family's connections to intimidate Richard House, the new goalkeeper on our team, by meddling in his father's work at the ministry. But now the Flint clan has far bigger problems. One of their roulette, Ives, was arrested at Azkaban and thrown into the cage for using the Imperious Curse. They've spent so many galleons on legal fees trying to get him out that they haven't had a moment to indulge Flint's schemes. So you can relax. Flint won't be up to anything during tomorrow's game. Chapter 185, 409, Off Topic. Harry hadn't seen Hagrid in days. To Ginny, his sudden avoidance must have seemed odd. Harry, who usually rushed to the giant's hut at every opportunity, now steered clear of the groundskeeper. Ron simply assumed his friend was preoccupied with brewing potions or spending time with Ginny. Draco never noticed. He spent all his free hours in the Slytherin common room orbiting Pansy. But Harry's absence wasn't about busyness. He was afraid. Every time he'd glimpsed Hagrid lately, especially after witnessing the man spark a swirling bonfire with a single gesture, Harry's instincts had screamed for him to run. In Hagrid's presence, he felt shrunken, as if standing beside some prehistoric behemoth. His hair stood on end, his nerves pulsed. Danger. Something in Hagrid's eyes, or the raw power humming beneath those broad shoulders, left Harry feeling that he no longer controlled his own life. He had never experienced such primal terror, not even during his most harrowing confrontations with Voldemort. Or perhaps at those moments, his senses had been dulled. Professor Ryan once explained that Harry's accelerated magical growth had awakened deep, savage instincts lurking in his blood. Harry had stared at him in confusion. But Professor, back then my potion hadn't even started bubbling. Ryan had offered a calm, unreadable smile. That has nothing to do with the potion. Does Riddle's existence really have no effect on you? Ryan had asked me once, his voice equal parts curiosity and concern. Two souls vying for the same identity only stirs the fragments in your being more than ever before. That potion you took merely accelerated a process that had already begun. At the time, I agreed. Ryan's explanation seemed to make sense. But even now, I couldn't shake the feeling he'd held something back. I remembered, vividly, the moment I returned to Earth from the moon, the way I and the phoenix in my chest both felt as though we'd awakened from an impossibly long sleep. When I confided in Ron and Ginny, they insisted it was nothing more than an illusion. Yet the memory lingered, stubborn and insistent. I pushed the thought aside as I approached Hagrid's hut. The wooden door creaked open before I could knock a second time, and a wave of warmth rolled out to soothe the chill clinging to my robes. Inside, Fang lay under the heavy oaken table, his tail sweeping contentedly back and forth. In the dim corner by the back wall, Alispade the giant spider was curled in sleep, his 8 eyes slowly drifting closed. From the hearth, Hephaestus, the tiny salamander-like creature born of flame, traced glowing patterns across the coals, its agate red glow dancing among the shadows. I stepped in past the threshold, the familiar comfort of Hagrid's home melting the last of my doubts, at least for a moment. Hagrid was seated cross-legged on a cushion by the fire, prodding the flames with a pine branch that looked suspiciously polished, no doubt from Fang's chewing. Harry froze in the doorway. In his eyes, Hagrid resembled a volcano about to blow, yet the giant hadn't stirred an inch. What kind of door did this magic trick? "Come on in, Harry," Hagrid called, finally setting the pine branch aside and turning to him. Fang, sprawled across the hearth, gave the branch a quick lick, as if it were a melting ice cream cone. "Aha! So this is the look on your face when you're scared," Hagrid boomed, clearly delighted. Ron, standing beside Harry, couldn't resist a tease. "Amazing, isn't it? Hagrid can see in the dark and even work magic on doors." Hagrid shot Ron a mock glare, his beetle-black eyes flicking toward Draco. "I thought you told him," he grumbled. Draco waved him off with an air of indifference. "Not my fault," he said coolly. Ron slid onto a bench next to Hagrid and gave Fang a friendly nod. "Nothing to it," he said with a shrug. "I just got sidetracked, that's all." Harry shook his head and stepped inside. The door swung shut behind him with a decisive snap, leaving him alone in the warmth of the hut. Harry ducked into Hagrid's hut just as the sky outside was turning rose gold with sunset. "Harry, you're finally done, right?" Hagrid's voice carried a hint of complaint. Harry forced a grin. "I know you're the new Quidditch captain, and the team has practice straight through the holidays, but—" Hagrid waved a massive hand. "Ginny and I could use a little private time, you know?" Harry mumbled something half-heartedly and felt his cheeks burn. Thank Merlin for Hagrid's scatterbrained nature. His frustrations never lasted long. Quickly changing the subject, Harry said, "By the way, you mentioned finding a companion for Hephaestus. Have you decided which element to pair him with?" "Wind," Hagrid offered, scratching his head. "Cloud?" Ron suggested, leaning forward. "Lightning?" Hagrid tried, turning to Ron as if seeking approval. Ron's gaze flicked among the 3 options, but conspicuously skipped the one Harry suspected Hagrid liked best, the silent partner, Alispade. Hagrid sighed. "I even asked Professor Dumbledore about it. He came by to study Hephaestus himself and warned me to stop using my animating charms, or at least not to give those creations full life. He said if I go on like this, I might end up a squib." Hagrid's face, usually so full of bluster, went pale. Then out of nowhere he jerked upright and gasped. "Ah!" Harry, Ron, and to Harry's surprise, Draco, who'd slipped in behind them, rushed to his side. "Hagrid, are you all right?" Harry asked. "Did Hephaestus do something to you?" Ron blurted out. Hagrid blinked rapidly, hesitation in his eyes. No, nothing like that. I just had a fright, that's all." He rubbed his temples as if chasing away a sudden headache. Harry exchanged a look with Ron and Draco. Whatever Hagrid had stumbled into, it sounded far bigger than a simple Quidditch schedule or a private moment with Ginny. And it all revolved around that mysterious, perhaps perilous project with Hephaestus. "Dumbledore says Hephaestus is nothing more than a common fire-born creature. It can't harm me. At worst, it just makes me hungrier." Hagrid wrapped the long, thick oak handle of his wand, still slightly curved, but finally liberated from its long-suffering pink umbrella. Draco leaned forward. "Is that really yours?" Everyone turned, eyes fixed on the wand. "Aye," Hagrid replied, giving it a fond pat. "It was broken before, all because I was falsely accused of killing Myrtle. But thanks to Professor Dumbledore and Arthur Weasley, my name was cleared, and this beauty was retrieved from the umbrella at last. Otherwise, I'd still be forced to work in secret. He grinned. Last time I sneaked a spell, it was on that fat boy at the Dursleys. He chuckled, scratching his thick beard. Pity he already looked like a pig. I could only conjure him a curly tail. With that, Hagrid winked at Harry. Harry felt a sudden warmth press against his thigh and shifted in his seat, cheeks burning. Hephaestus wriggled free of the circle of light, morphed into Fang's exact shape, and stuck out his fiery tongue. "Hey, Hephaestus," Hagrid chided with a grin. "That's a wand, not a chew toy." Harry glanced down at the thick forest carpet beneath the dog, puzzled. "How come it isn't burning?" "Because Hephaestus can control his flames," Hagrid answered. "He won't ignite anything unless he wants to." "See?" Ron said, brimming with excitement. He plunged his hand straight through the creature's blazing coat and into the warm, living core. Harry shook his head in wonder. Hephaestus should have been speaking to them, as he did in Dumbledore's office, yet here, in Fang's form, he could only bark. The fiery fur hid his true nature. Just then, the infernal dog shimmered and transformed back into a human outline that resembled Ron. "Hello, Harry Potter," he said, his voice calm and clear. Harry exhaled, startled. "You can talk again?" Hephaestus dipped his head. "I lose the power of speech when I copy a mute creature exactly. Dumbledore warned me that my mimicry was too thorough. In my origin, Nal form, I speak by channeling, well, mysterious old magic." Hagrid chuckled, chucking a handful of embers into the air. "That's why, once he's in Fang's shape, he can only bark, just like a real dog." Harry exchanged a glance with Ron. Between Hagrid's boisterous laughter and Hephaestus's split personality, there was no doubt life at Hogwarts was about to get a lot more interesting. Harry's eyes went wide. "Wait, when it shifts into a spider, can it still speak?" Hagrid nodded gravely. "Aye, acromantulas are able to talk." Harry thought for a moment. "So all this time it's only been imitating the appearances and voices of Fang, you, Ron, and Draco?" Hagrid glanced at Ron, who trembled at the very mention of the giant spider. "That's the long and short of it." Chapter 410, another interpretation of the prophecy. At last, it was Hephaestus's turn to entertain everyone by shifting into one fantastic form after another, everything from a winged stallion to a blazing salamander, but to our relief, not the dreaded Alispad. We sat spellbound as he transformed again and again. Harry, in particular, was lost in Ginny's requested version, a Gorgon sprinting across a rocky plain, her writhing serpentine hair hissing with every step. Time slipped by unnoticed. Then, with a sharp crack, Draco's palm hit the table. "Oi, what are you doing?" Hagrid yanked at his beard so hard he almost plucked it clean out. "Draco, you all right?" Draco fixed Harry with a steely glare. "Harry, do you even remember why we came here?" Blinking, Harry shook his head free of the haze. "To see Hephaestus?" Ron, rubbing the back of his head, cocked his brow. "Azkaban? At Azkaban?" Harry's eyes flew open as if he'd just woken from a deep dream. Ron's jaw dropped. "Why would you say that?" Hagrid's frown deepened. "Azkaban? Why on earth are you talking about Azkaban?" We all exchanged bewildered looks. Somehow, in the midst of marveling at Hephaestus's ever-shifting shapes, we'd forgotten exactly what we were doing here in the first place. "Doesn't that strike you as odd?" Draco paced the floor, cheeks flushed. In Harry's last dream, Voldemort was planning to break into Azkaban, and now the prison itself has vanished. They say the orderlies who bring meals can't even remember where it's supposed to be. He waved a hand dramatically. The Ministry sent hundreds of broom-riding aurors to scour every stretch of sea and sky, yet not a single person has laid eyes on Azkaban. Put two and two together. Of course it's Voldemort. Harry frowned. "Are you sure?" Hagrid leaned back against the wall, one hand absently stroking Hephaestus, his baby dragon now shrunk to hatchling size. He gave a grunt of contentment. "Professor Dumbledore says there's nothing to worry about, that this disappearance is part of his plan." To Hagrid, every twist and turn of events unfolded exactly as Dumbledore intended. If the headmaster had known all along that Voldemort intended to target Azkaban, he must have incorporated its vanishing into his grand design. Draco stopped mid-stride, his excitement giving way to a sudden seriousness. I understand now." "But I can't say it," Harry whispered, glancing around at the curious faces turned toward him. He remembered Ryan's warning about his mysterious link to Voldemort, and understood why he'd have to keep this secret for just a little longer. Dumbledore's plan was obvious. He had deliberately arranged for Voldemort's return. Only by restoring the Dark Lord in his entirety, soul and all, could the Horcruxes be destroyed properly. After all, only the fragment containing the Master Soul could undo the protections without unraveling their magic. Harry himself believed that Voldemort's life was a small price to pay if it meant obliterating those cursed objects. The real danger lay elsewhere. Once fully restored, Voldemort would surely scatter his Horcruxes around the world instead of foolishly hiding them all in Britain. In the dank, shadowed cells of Azkaban, Voldemort yawned, stretching long, pale fingers in the gloom. At Hogwarts, meanwhile, Tom Riddle strolled along the shore of the Black Lake, Dumbledore at his elbow and Severus Snape trailing in their wake. Riddle paused, gazing out at the water, and said with a teasing edge, "You still rely on that prophecy so much?" "If it had been me," Dumbledore interrupted him gently. "That, too, is part of the prophecy, Tom, or at least another way to read it." He turned to Snape. "You, Severus, never heard the entire prophecy. I'm afraid I drove you away before it was finished." Severus's scar pulsed once, twice, but his face betrayed nothing. Dumbledore merely offered a small, knowing smile. No one could conceal their emotions quite like Severus Snape. Dumbledore's expression darkened as he considered the man before him. Perhaps this explained Snape's self-imposed mental barrier, torn between a desire for oblivion and an inability to relinquish the past. Love, in other words. He turned to Riddle. The one who can vanquish the Dark Lord is soon to be born. His parents have already eluded Voldemort 3 times, and his birth will occur at the end of the 7th month. The Dark Lord has marked him as his mortal enemy, each destined to destroy the other, yet Voldemort remains unaware of a power this child will wield. In the end, only one can survive. Dumbledore leaned forward, his voice softening. "It's all laid out in the prophecy, born at July's end, bearing a strength beyond Voldemort's comprehension, the son of parents who escaped him thrice, and destined so that one must perish. But these are old stories now." "I have studied this prophecy countless times since my resurrection," Dumbledore said softly. Riddle leaned forward, his dark eyes glinting. "You are missing a crucial point, the fact that being marked as a powerful enemy is itself part of the prophecy." Dumbledore frowned. "That, however, is not a necessary condition." Riddle's lips curved into a faint smile. "I once believed it was." Dumbledore's gaze drifted to the window, as if recalling distant memories. "There are only 2 true requirements. First, that the child's parents must have escaped Voldemort's pursuit on 3 separate occasions. Second, that the child be born at the end of July. Being marked," Riddle continued, "only consigns you to a fate where, ultimately, only one can survive, Voldemort or the prophesied one." Dumbledore turned back to face him. "Other boys who fit those criteria are nothing more than what Muggles might call spare tires. If Harry should fall, the prophecy does not shatter. Voldemort's own overconfidence will bring devastation upon the wizarding world, and in that turmoil, the next child meeting those conditions will emerge." Riddle's expression darkened. "Is that why you've been allowing Harry to live?" Dumbledore's voice remained calm, but carried an edge of steel. "Indeed." Snape, who had stood silently at the edge of the room, suddenly cleared his throat. His face grew pale and rigid. "Excuse me." Without another word, he turned on his heel and strode toward the castle corridors, leaving an awkward silence in his wake. Snow swirled through the courtyard as Dumbledore's voice rang out, "Wait! Neville is innocent!" With a single, almost invisible flick of his wand, Severus Snape collapsed into the snowbank, his wand clattering away. Snow caught in his hair and eyelashes, and he lay there, stunned, mouth twitching. "How did you?" Snape croaked, his voice half lost in the gusting wind. "Severus, enough," Dumbledore said, stepping forward and brushing snow from his robes. "There is someone else you must know about." From beneath his hood, Voldemort, Tom Riddle, leaned in, pale eyes ablaze. "Another? Who?" "A third candidate," Dumbledore replied, his tone heavy with reluctance. "One I almost overlooked." He glanced at Estella Gettler, who stood nearby, shivering, and then at Rubeus Hagrid, his great figure looming against the drifting snow. Even here, in the heart of winter's chill, their unlikely alliance was complete. Snape disarmed, Gettler uneasy, Hagrid resolute, and now the Dark Lord himself before them. "He is our final insurance," Dumbledore continued. "His magic rivals Voldemort's. If the prophecy holds true, he will confront the Dark Lord and emerge victorious. A faint hiss escaped behind Voldemort's lips. And if Harry or Neville should fail? Dumbledore waved a hand, dismissing the possibility. Their roles are secondary. Silence fell, broken only by the wind. Then Voldemort spoke, his voice low and controlled. You invoked this prophecy at our first meeting. Repeat it now. I will not disappoint you. As he stepped forward, his dark cloak swirling around him, the ancient promise hung in the air, colder and more certain than the winter night itself. Albus didn't press to know whom he referred to. Dumbledore's tight lips mad. It clear, he wouldn't say. Instead, he noted that Severus's face was crusted in frost, each breath steaming through his nose and mouth. Without a word, Tom raised his wand. A shimmering, invisible ward sprang to life around Snape's body, deflecting the icy spray to either side. Thank you, Tom, Dumbledore said quietly. Otherwise, poor Severus here would have ended up a potions master frozen solid. All right, I'll tell you, Tom muttered. He shot Dumbledore a sidelong glance, but turned his attention back to Snape. Dumbledore swallowed. Do you remember when you were born? He asked, his voice catching as he stole a quick look at Tom Riddle. Tom looked momentarily bewildered. My birthday? Of course I remember. July 7th, 1926. Dumbledore's expression grew thoughtful. Tom watched him carefully. A strange question hovered unasked between them. Could this boy, this unusually gifted, unnaturally composed child, also be the one of prophecy? If that were the case, Dumbledore would have to call Tom, of all people, his son. Chapter 187, Death Eater's Wilderness Survival. Albus Dumbledore stood before him, that familiar Cheshire Cat smile curling his lips. No, it's July 31st, he announced matter-of-factly. Tom Riddle's dark eyes flared. A Horcrux, then? But Myrtle died in April. Dumbledore lifted a wry eyebrow. Think it through. You bear a single life force. Yes, that would suffice to reform a body, but not to restore a fully independent soul. Riddle's breath caught. So I'm autonomous now? Hardly, the headmaster replied coolly. You carry the identity of a master soul, yet you are far from the original. For the first time, Riddle's handsome features contorted with anger. Then I'm not truly Tom Riddle? Just some spare vessel, tailor-made to satisfy the magical criteria, gifted with memories of my youth, but destined to fade? Dumbledore's smile widened into a gentle smirk. You are Tom, and yet you are not wholly Tom. Riddle's voice trembled with barely contained fury. Explain yourself. Dumbledore leaned forward, the flicker of candlelight dancing in his eyes. You emerged from a tapestry of fragments. Quirrell's ashes mingled with the pages of your diary, bound by that illicit magic circle, energized by the very sparks of life that Harry's curse unleashed, and all of it pressed and reshaped by your own lingering essence. You are a composite, powerful, infinitely dangerous, but incomplete. Riddle's jaw clenched. Whatever he had expected, this was something altogether more unsettling. And in that charged silence, the true nature of his rebirth hung between them, fragile, fractured, and unlike anything either had seen before. The candles in Dumbledore's study flickered as Tom Riddle stood before the headmaster's desk, arms folded, expression unreadable. Quirrell? Riddle's single word hung in the air like a challenge. Dumbledore leaned forward, fingertips pressed together. Quirrell was born in September, he said thoughtfully. His parents were Muggles, hardly the ancestor you'd expect for such a role. Riddle shook his head. Even when I first awakened as a diary, I never carried Quirrell's memories. I was always myself. Dumbledore's gaze was gentle but firm. And the dark mark, he asked. Riddle's lip curled in impatience. If I were truly a piece of Voldemort's soul, the mark would have appeared the moment I came into being, long before Harry Potter ever named me his equal. Precisely, Dumbledore agreed. The amount of Horcrux residue in Quirrell was negligible. You might as well have branded a cow. What truly matters is the power you absorbed at Godric's Hollow. Riddle frowned. My power? When you destroyed Voldemort's body, Dumbledore explained, you intercepted his magic, and Harry's too, and bound it into that black metal plate you call your Horcrux. That fusion is what makes you unique. He gave Riddle a searching look. You are Voldemort, yet not him. You are Harry, yet not Harry. Your lineage spans Tom Riddle and Merope Gaunt, and James Potter and Lily Evans. And the dark mark you bear, it is not merely a brand, but the seal of the primary soul. You and Voldemort share that bond more intimately than any Horcrux could. A soft smile curved Dumbledore's lips. In fact, you also fulfill the prophecy. Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Riddle closed his eyes, a cold wave of revulsion washing over him as Dumbledore's words sank in. My soul belongs entirely to Voldemort. You've gone too far this time. Riddle's voice faltered. Even he was at a loss for words. On the floor beside him, Snape sat slumped, his expression broken, his eyes drained of life. But you can't deny that you've lost all objectivity here, Dumbledore replied with a faint, inscrutable smile. Riddle's fingers twitched, as if itching to unleash a curse. He'd long suspected that Dumbledore intended the blade for Voldemort, to spare Harry the burden of sacrifice, but he never dreamed it was poisoned too, specifically to finish off the Dark Lord. Worse still was the realization that Dumbledore's faith in him rested solely on the fragment of Harry Potter's soul leaking through his own. Across the chamber, hidden within a silvery rift of space, Kate sat on a floating divan. She stared out the window, her eyes shimmering like quicksilver. On her wrist, the magical sigil of connection pulsed with faint silver light. Gently, she reached out and stroked Ryan's cheek. His skin was translucent as dew, flickering with watery luminescence, a fragile beauty that seemed it could be blown away by the slightest breath. "Ryan," she whispered, voice soft with wonder, "did that wizard mean you?" She frowned, recalling the name she just heard. "I'm pretty sure he called himself Albus Dumbledore." As Ryan's pillow, his chosen in-game avatar, Kate naturally received far better treatment than Harry. While Harry still had to down potions and endure strenuous physical training, Kate simply fought monsters in the mindscape, leveling up at will. There, her body underwent seamless, automatic transformations in perfect sync with her mind. And since magic in this world springs from thought alone, Ryan himself bore no physical strain. It left Kate free to polish every skill entirely within the game. And Ryan couldn't shake the fear that she might one day mistake reality for the mindscape and lash out at Dumbledore. Lately, Kate's inclination toward that very danger had grown stronger. After all, you don't have levels in the real world. Dumbledore might be a demigod wizard with a phoenix's bloodline and a vast repertoire of spells, but he had never mastered body transformation. At best, he possessed a bit more resilience than an ordinary sorcerer. Confronted with Kate, swift as lightning, able to transmute raw magic into a poison more lethal than any curse, Dumbledore found himself perilously exposed. That's why Ryan had abandoned his habit of shadowing Kate in the mindscape around the clock. He kept yanking her back to reality for regular check-ins. "You still haven't answered my question," he called out. In the blink of an eye, Kate's figure dissolved into a living shadow, and then reappeared directly behind him. Kate threw herself at Ryan, wrapping her arms around his neck and sinking her teeth into his shoulder. He winced, but didn't pull away. Through gritted teeth, she whispered, "It was me." Ryan ran a hand through his hair and offered a wry shrug. "Dumbledore must have guessed that my hidden magic outstrips even the Smiths, my grandfather and father, who were supposed to be the benchmark. He probably figured Harry was a disposable pawn. Let the boy who lived fall once, then use me to bind him with some protective mark against Voldemort." He paused, meeting Kate's eyes. "Speaking of Harry, do you think that little brat will enter next year's Triwizard Tournament?" The question snapped Kate back from wherever her thoughts had drifted. She felt oddly detached, like her mind was playing its own game, her body moving under the guidance of a hidden will. Yet she retained every memory from her first day at Hogwarts until now, and she didn't feel absent from reality. Her routines, gathering news in the corridors, hitting the books, even indulging in a bit of harmless gossip, continued without a hitch. It was only her focus on Ryan, Luna, and Hermione that had somehow slipped away. Unconsciously, Kate began to piece together the fragments Ryan had let slip. Dumbledore's secret calculations, Harry's potential sacrifice, and Ryan's role as the key to Voldemort's undoing all swirled in her mind. She felt the undercurrent of his impatience, the urgency in every casual shrug and offhand remark. A cold knot of dread tightened in her chest. If Dumbledore was willing to gamble with Harry's life, what chance did they, or she, really have against Voldemort? And what would become of the bond Ryan spoke of? As unanswered questions piled up, Kate realized that the calm surface of their conversation concealed a torrent of schemes and sacrifices. Somewhere beneath her cool composure, her subconscious was already bracing for the storm to come. Ryan was planning to take Harry P. Otter in search of the Resurrection Stone, and, as far as Kate was concerned, everything that had happened so far, the chaos of the Triwizard Tournament and Grindelwald's sudden release from Nurmengard, had been set in motion by him. She just knew he'd stir up trouble again in next year's tournament. Maybe, Ryan replied only with a faint shrug. He snapped his fingers. In an instant, the view seared away from Dumbledore's office and the gathered professors. Instead, they peered down upon a tiny, windswept island in the North Sea. There, Ryan said softly, those are Death Eaters. Kate, perched on his shoulders, leaned forward. What are they doing? She asked, excitement bright in her eyes. These were the same masked figures who'd terrified her as a child, now casually lining the rocky beach with long, enchanted tridents. With each thrust into the surf, they speared silver fish and hauled them ashore. Clearly, this wasn't a one-off excursion. Bellatrix Lestrange's calves were muscular and bronzed from days under the sun, and every Death Eater bore the look of seasoned fishermen rather than dark wizards awaiting orders. They're fishing, Ryan confirmed, watching the grim ritual with a wry smile. Because of Voldemort's resurrection ceremony, they're avoiding magic whenever possible. Even minor charms could risk alerting the Order, or worse, interfering with the ritual itself. He turned to Kate and grinned. Welcome to the first episode of Death Eaters in the Wilderness. Tune in. You've got a year of it ahead of you. I'd be happy to help polish the chapter. Could you please paste the full machine-translated text here? Once I have the entire passage, I can rewrite it into smooth, idiomatic English while preserving all plot points, characters, and details. Chapter 412, Ron Consults Ryan. Ever since Voldemort embarked on his protracted resurrection ritual, Ryan had been keeping an eye on Azkaban. Using discreet charms, he recorded and edited the amusing and occasionally perilous antics of the Death Eaters stranded on that frozen, deserted island. He made regular compilations of their mishaps and near meltdowns, and the very first audience for these Azkaban survival diaries were Kate and Penelope. Fleur wasn't shown the footage. Ryan felt she didn't need it. As for Luna and Hermione, he decided it was still too early to share it with them. In Ryan's mind, once Riddle finally defeated Voldemort, he would debut a full-length feature, Death Eaters, Wilderness Survival Story, in the chain of cinemas owned by his family around the world. Before he knew it, Saturday arrived. On the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch, a biting wind whipped snow across the stands, yet nearly every student brimmed into the bleachers, eager for the match. Ryan took a seat at the front row, looking a little out of place against the clamor of cheering classmates. To his right, Luna Lovegood and Ginny Weasley sat arm in arm, quietly exchanging jokes. On his left, however, was an empty seat. Hermione Granger was conspicuously absent. He'd given Hermione a belated birthday gift the night before, arranging a surprise she couldn't refuse. The delay meant she wouldn't make it to the match after all. But to Ryan, the empty chair beside him felt oddly conspicuous. As the players thundered onto the field below and the roar of the crowd swelled, he leaned back, his mind already half on the upcoming game, and half on the footage waiting for its world premiere. Before he could stop everyone noticing the empty seat beside him, Ron shamelessly slid over and plopped down. Ready for today's match, Slytherin versus Ravenclaw. Draco's our seeker this time, Ron added, oblivious to the warning glint in Ryan's eye. Then he tilted his head. By the way, where's Hermione? Ron blinked. Hermione? Why do you ask? Ryan's gaze sharpened. If you're lying, he said quietly, I'll make sure you live out that ridiculous rumor about Harry, too ashamed to show your face, every single day until term's over. Swallowing, Ron stammered. No, nothing like that. I was just curious why she didn't come. He cast a nervous glance at Ginny, who was scanning the stands for Harry, then leaned forward and whispered, Honestly, I want to learn how to get along with girls. A bemused smile tugged at Ryan's lips. Let me guess, you've been sneaking around with that little book, 12 Tips to Charm Witches? You actually called it pure gold, thinking it'd teach you how to ditch Lavender and win Hermione's favor, right? Ron, who'd been hunched over the rulebook, finally worked up the nerve to approach Ryan. "Hey, you were peeking at my notes," he squeaked, his voice cracking embarrassingly as he fluttered his slender fingers in mock offense. Head swiveled toward him. Ginny dropped her face into her hands, mortified that her brother was making such a ridiculous racket, and Percy gave a half-exasperated, half-ignoring forehead rub. Desperate to change the subject, Ron jabbed a finger at the sky. "Look, there's Harry Potter." Sure enough, Harry was already streaking across the Quidditch pitch on his broom, cutting through the afternoon light far ahead of the other players. "All right, that's enough gawking," Ron murmured, trying to sound commanding. Ryan gave him a wry, amused look. "Honestly, no one's going to remember you once Harry's out there. If you could play half as well as your famous brothers, you'd be up on that broom too." With a casual flick of his wand, he summoned a battered deck chair that hovered in alongside the pitch, the kind of worn-out recliner a homeless muggle might use in a park. Perched atop it were Fred and George, grinning madly and waving at the crowd below. Professor McGonagall, watching the tableau, pursed her lips into a tight line of disapproval. From the sidelines, Ron called out, "Oi, Fred, George!" The twins waved even harder. George shouted, "I'm your younger brother." Ron swung around, ready to thunder at his brothers for ditching him to put on a show, only to find his path blocked by a huge banner Fred and George had unfurled. Painted in Ron's favorite orange-gold ink, the letters glittered and curled across the cloth. "Support Ravenclaw. Mist bottles only 1 silver sickle. Limited time offer." Fred and George balanced nimbly on their ticking red, portable swivel seats, gleefully jostling the banner so every spectator could see. Above them, Professor McGonagall hovered on her broom, arms folded and lips twitching in restrained amusement. Without her wand at the ready, she couldn't quite seize the twins. Even Percy, more prim and distant since his father's promotion to head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, stood by as a bemused onlooker. Suddenly, Lee Jordan's voice boomed across the stands, amplified by a quick charm. "Ladies and gentlemen, before today's match begins, don't miss Ron Weasley's patented mist bottle, now at a snitch-stealing price, courtesy of your exclusive distributors, Fred and George Weasley and Professor McGonagall." "Jordan," McGonagall called in protest, but Lee had already shifted into play-by-play mode. "And we're off. Flint from Slytherin secures the quaffle first." "I'm convinced Lee took a cut from Fred and George," Ron said with a rueful smile. "Why don't you just watch the match?" Ryan suggested, hoping to steer him away. He wasn't about to share his own flirting tips. Ron simply didn't have the knack. Even Penelope seemed more interested in Ryan than in Ron. "The match? Please," Ron scoffed as he watched the brooms weaving overhead. "Harry and the others will win easily." He paused, shifting awkwardly. "By the way, Ryan, about that question I asked earlier." Ryan sighed and pulled Luna closer, frowning. Of all people, Ron actually remembered. With a quick flick, he cast a subtle silencing charm on Luna so she couldn't overhear, then turned back to Ron. "So," Ryan said with a teasing grin, "when did you suddenly start taking an interest in girls? You do realize Harry and Draco already have girlfriends, right?" Ron scratched the back of his neck. "Yeah, I know, and here I am, still the only single one of the Hogwarts trio. This chapter isn't over yet. Click the next page to continue reading." Ryan shot Ron a mock-serious look. "All right, spill it. Which unlucky girl has taken up residence in that daydreaming head of yours?" "Unlucky," Ron echoed, blinking. Then, with sudden swagger, he squared his shoulders. "I, Ron Weasley, the inventor of the mist bottle, son of the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, tallest member of Hogwarts' famed musketeers, and owner of a neat little nest egg of 100 gold galleons before graduation." "The tallest?" Ryan interrupted, eyebrow arching. "Fine," Ron huffed. "The tallest." Ryan leaned forward. "But who is she?" Ron cast a furtive glance around the common room, then dropped his voice to a hush. "Lavender Brown. Gryffindor." Ryan's eyebrow climbed higher still. Lavender Brown, the very girl Ron had once used to torment Hermione, flaunting their makeouts in every corridor, lounge, and hallway, just to prove he wasn't too good for his sister Ginny. If Ron's sudden infatuation involved her, Ryan knew Lavender was in for more complications than she bargained for. When Lavender Brown's infatuation with Ron reached its peak, he grew impatient, going so far as to criticize her privately to Harry and the others. In the end, he callously broke things off, and chose Hermione instead. Reflecting on that betrayal, Ryan shifted her gaze to the Gryffindor stand, where Lavender sat among her friends. Though she was ostensibly watching the Quidditch match, Lavender's eyes kept drifting back to Ron on the pitch. Chapter 189. Lavender Brown's Prophecy. Lavender Brown. Her name evokes the lavender flower, long a symbol of patiently waiting for love. In the original timeline, she wouldn't have noticed Ronald Weasley's charms until 6th year, when he unexpectedly became keeper for the Gryffindor Quidditch team. His outstanding performance in that fateful match against Slytherin would have won her admiration, and eventually her heart. Yet in this altered reality, Lavender found herself smitten with Ron far sooner. Across the Great Hall, Ryan watched with a sly smile. With a casual flick of his finger, he unleashed a tiny mote of magic, so small it was invisible to the naked eye, and sent it hurtling in a straight line toward Lavender. It alighted gently on her brow, just as she once again turned those dreamy eyes on Ron. Lavender had always considered herself fortunate to share a school year with Harry Potter. She had assumed the Sorting Hat would place her in Gryffindor, the same house as Headmaster Dumbledore. To her surprise and mild disappointment, Harry was sent to Ravenclaw instead. Yet her curiosity about the boy who lived soon gave way to fascination with another student, a tall, striking figure who stood head and shoulders above his classmates. Lavender had barely returned to the Ravenclaw common room, clutching her newly won Skywalker Gold card when Parvati Patil, sister of her roommate Padma, came bounding over. "Lavender, have you heard the latest about Ron Weasley?" Parvati's eyes sparkled. "They say he's secretly Harry Potter's lover, and, get this, he's even related to Neville Longbottom." Before Lavender could reply, Parvati rattled off another rumor. "No, really. Ron and Harry once rescued Draco Malfoy and his cronies from that mountain troll, then all three of them teamed up to defend the Philosopher's Stone. And yet I've also heard Ron doesn't like men, that he's engaged to Draco and Harry both, while Neville's cozying up to Anthony instead." Lavender blinked. "Why are you so obsessed with Ron Weasley, Parvati? It's always some new twist." Parvati laughed and produced a curious little pipe. "He's the overlooked Weasley, Lavender. Everyone already talks about Harry Potter and the famous Weasley twins. But Ron, the third son, every scrap of gossip about him feels fresh. Besides, he's invented this strange memory-sharing smoke. Want to try it?" With a skeptical shrug, Lavender accepted. Parvati lit the pipe and blew a curl of violet-blue haze into the air. Lavender inhaled, then blinked at the sudden shift in her senses. She found herself seated at the Weasley family dinner table, surrounded by mountain-high platters of roast chicken, heaps of buttery potatoes, and endless Yorkshires. At the center of it all was Ron himself, gleefully devouring 4 gigantic chicken legs in rapid succession, never once wincing or pausing. Lavender pulled away, the memory fading. She realized with surprising clarity that what she'd seen wasn't just a wild appetite, but a hearty, unflappable spirit. Exactly the kind of confidence she might admire in someone. And it left her with a new, decidedly positive impression of Ron Weasley. Lavender Brown had never felt so free. The simple pleasure of eating whatever she wanted, without worrying about calories or feeling greasy, had completely won her over. From then on, whenever she had a few galleons to spare, she'd indulge in delicious treats and steal glances at Ron Weasley across the Great Hall. She realized, sooner than she expected, that he'd noticed. Every now and then he'd catch her eye and return her look with that unmistakably goofy grin of his. One afternoon, Parvati's sister Padma let slip that she'd seen Ron reading a little book titled 12 Winning Tricks to Charm Witches. Padma was utterly convinced that Ron was setting his sights on her own sister. Could it be true? Could Ron be falling in love with someone? Lavender's heart danced at the possibility. Today, Lavender sat perched in the Ravenclaw stands for the big Slytherin-Ravenclaw Quidditch match, her excitement mounting with every cheer. Each time she caught Ron's clear blue eyes from across the pitch, her pulse thundered in her ears. "I have to tell him how I feel the moment the final whistle blows," she resolved. Beside her, Ryan watched Lavender go from eager anticipation to breathless awe, as though a flickering candle had caught a sudden breeze. He gave her a curious look. He never would have guessed the real reason for her newest crush. All the while, Lavender stared at Ron's warm smile and felt as if she were dreaming. After all, Harry Potter and Ron Weasley were both Gryffindors, just like her. And let's not forget her housemates Neville and Hermione, who were perfectly content cheering from their own seats. Lavender Brown sat at her vanity, staring at her own reflection with a wry smile. Every time she thought she'd pinned down how her story would unfold at Hogwarts, it shifted again, like ink spilling across a page. In this version, Harry still earned the seeker position on the Gryffindor Quidditch team, but Professor Snape was more merciless than ever, docking house points from dawn until dusk. Professor Quirrell never lost consciousness in the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, and the dramatic Phoenix and Invisible Beast confrontations on the Astronomy Tower never happened. Sirius Black remained imprisoned, his name unredeemed. Harry and Ron never struck up a truce with Draco. Instead, when Harry, Ron, and Hermione snuck into the forbidden fourth-floor corridor, it was Hermione, rather than Malfoy, who caught the blast of whatever cursed trap lay in wait. Harry collapsed instead, sleeping so deeply they thought him dead. Lavender shook her head, as if to clear the fog these ever-changing scenarios draped around her mind. Instantly, everything reset to sixth year again. But this time, Ron hadn't invented his mysterious mist bottle, and the Weasley twins had apparently dropped out of Hogwarts altogether to run some muggle shop on Diagon Alley. Minister Fudge still clung stubbornly to his post, and Arthur Weasley's career remained stuck in the same quiet rut. And yet, Lore of Glory's past still played out on the pitch. Ron won the Quidditch keeper spot, and Gryffindor triumphed over Slytherin by the narrowest of margins. Most bewildering of all, Ron Weasley was now Lavender Brown's boyfriend. Lavender pressed her hand against her cheeks, which were growing alarmingly warm. In her mind's eye, she replayed the stolen moments. Swift, public kisses in between classes, a flutter of hands brushing together in corridors, laughter that dissolved into shy, sidelong glances. But beyond those kisses, there were no late-night confessions, no whispered dreams or fears shared under a starlit sky, just those breathless, thrilling pecks that always left her wanting more. She closed her eyes, letting out a soft, exasperated sigh. No matter how many times the memory shifted, and shift it would, she knew one thing for certain. Of all the endless variations her story could take, nothing felt quite as intoxicating as Ron's hand in hers. Lavender Brown bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering so loudly she was sure the whole dormitory could hear it. Moonlight spilled through the window, illuminating Parvati Patil's worried face leaning close. "Lavender, are you all right?" Parvati's voice was gentle but urgent. Lavender grasped the covers, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I wasn't dreaming. It was a vision. No, a prediction." Parvati's brow shot up. "A prediction?" Lavender pressed her hands to her temples, as if to steady the whirlwind of thoughts inside her head. "I've always been drawn to divination. I thought it was just curiosity, but now, do you think my third eye has actually opened?" Parvati gave a small, apologetic shake of her head. "I'm sorry I shook you awake. I just got so scared." Lavender took a shuddering breath. "I saw scenes from the future. Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Ron in their first and sixth years at Gryffindor, and there were moments with Ron and me." She swallowed hard. "He kept hinting he wanted to break up. Then, inexplicably, I'm poisoned. He's cold, distant. He falls for someone else, lost in mist, and then he leaves me." Parvati's violet eyes widened. "That's incredibly specific. Lavender, if you really saw that." Lavender shook her head, voice trembling. "Every detail felt so real. We can't just ignore it." Parvati's expression hardened with resolve. "Professor Trelawney will know what to do. We'll go to her first thing in the morning." Lavender let out a shaky laugh. "I hope she can help." They fell into thoughtful silence until Parvati straightened, a proud smile on her lips. "You know, things always turn out better in Gryffindor, even if Harry's only exceptional on the Quidditch pitch." She nudged Lavender playfully. "Come on, we'll fix this." Lavender managed a small smile of her own. "Together." Parvati squeezed her friend's shoulder. "Together." They lay back against their pillows, determination mingling with the lingering thrill of prophecy. Dawn was still hours away, and with it, the chance to rewrite what fate might hold. To be continued. Lavender Brown sat curled up on the window seat in the Gryffindor common room, her tea untouched at her side. Parvati Patil leaned against the armrest beside her, nibbling on a sugar quill. It was so different, Lavender murmured, shaking her head. In that vision, Professor Snape's favorite student wasn't Harry at all, but Draco Malfoy, and Draco spent every single day picking on Harry. Parvati frowned. But that never happened. I know, Lavender sighed. Then there was Ron. He didn't make any real progress until 6th year, and by then he'd somehow become keeper of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Hermione hardly changed at all, and Neville, he was just a little crybaby right up until 6th year, when he finally grew into himself. Parvati's eyebrows shot up. That's nothing like our world. Exactly, Lavender agreed, staring into her teacup. That's why I assumed it was all a dream, but it felt so real, especially what happened between Ron and me. Parvati sat up. You two? Lavender's cheeks flushed. I couldn't figure out how to show him I loved him. I kept twisting myself into what I thought he wanted, and it only drove him away. The sweetness of being in love, then the pain of losing it, was so vivid. Merlin's braid, Parvati whispered. Lavender glanced up. There's more. In that world, Harry's wand burst into a magical red spark instead of the usual green. And Ron, he didn't invent the mist bottle either. Parvati stared. So Harry's red spark was real, and Ron never created the mist bottle? There's more, isn't there? Lavender let out a small, mysterious sigh. Just then, the portrait of the fat lady swung open, and Ron Weasley stepped in. He paused in the doorway and caught Lavender's eye. Parvati nudged her. Well, whatever that was, it's over. Ron's back. Lavender drew a steadying breath. This time, she told herself, she wouldn't let reality slip away. What about 6th year? Lavender Brown asked, frowning. Parvati Patil couldn't contain her excitement. She grabbed Lavender's arm and gave it a little shake. Harry's timetable has changed, true, but it still gives us a great roadmap for next year's lessons. Chapter 414, The Puzzle Set by Ryan. After the match, Parvati Patil raised an eyebrow as Lavender Brown chattered excitedly beside her. Did you see how he never took his eyes off Malfoy? Lavender whispered with a grin. That's how Harry managed to snag the snitch. No matter what Flint and the rest did, they couldn't stop him. He only did it to needle Flint a little. Harry Potter catches the golden snitch. Ravenclaw wins. Lee Jordan's triumphant cry rang out across the pitch, unleashing a roar of applause from the stands. Even the Slytherins, usually quick to boo Potter, found themselves clapping at his deft play. He'd spared Flint and his teammates any further humiliation, and they couldn't help but respect the show. Professor McGonagall, who'd been scowling at Fred and George Weasley just moments before, now allowed herself a small, pleased smile. But Ron Weasley sat rigidly beside Harry, fixated not on the cheering crowd, but on the look Lavender had just given him. Ryan, he hissed, nudging Harry's friend on the next seat. What do I do? Ryan frowned in surprise. What's wrong, Ron? My heart sank the moment I saw her expression, Ron stammered, voice trembling. I thought Lavender liked me, but the way she looked at me, I swear she looked disgusted. He went pale, leaning even closer. If it hadn't been for Ryan's quick glance toward Luna Lovegood, seated just a row ahead, Ron's embarrassed admission might have carried across the stadium for everyone to hear. Instead, they huddled in silence, the echoes of the match still ringing in their ears, as Ryan prepared to help his friend decipher Lavender's icy glare. Let's eat first, Ryan suggested as the match ended, his gaze lingering on you with genuine concern. No one would have guessed he'd been the one to engineer the whole thing. 10 minutes later, in the warm glow of the Gryffindor girls' dormitory at Hogwarts, Parvati paced back and forth, her temper flaring. I told you, Lavender. Ron's not a good catch. Lavender rolled her eyes. You're making a mountain out of a molehill. He didn't do anything. Parvati halted in front of her, crossed her arms, and lowered her voice. He's playing you. Don't let him fool you again. Lavender sighed and flopped onto her bed. Maybe it was just a dream. She glanced around at her roommates, a defiant smile tugging at her lips. In that dream, Ron was in Ravenclaw, not Gryffindor. He was respectful, kind, a completely different person. Parvati snorted. So what about Professor Riddle? Isn't that the real crisis? Lavender's eyes lit up as she leaned forward. Oh, you want the dream details? Defense against the dark arts wasn't taught by some unknown. Snape was back at the helm. And the potions master? An ancient, rotund fellow with a fondness for pineapple. Horace Slughorn, Parvati gasped. At that very moment, miles away in his sumptuous country estate, Professor Slughorn nearly choked on a piece of candied pineapple. Back in the dormitory, Parvati's fierce scowl had already transformed into a look of wide-eyed wonder. "What are we going to do?" Parvati's voice trembled. "It can't be true that the defense against the dark arts post is cursed." "We need Professor Trelawney," she added, panic in her eyes as she turned to Ryan. "Professor Riddle, how can I possibly survive without you?" She pulled a folded timetable from under her pillow and pointed to the defense against the dark arts slot, where she'd drawn a little heart around it. Meanwhile, at the gates of Hogwarts Castle, Hermione and Neville stood side by side, blocking Ryan's path. "Hermione, are you choosing Neville over Ryan?" someone teased from the sidelines. Hermione flushed. "Absolutely not," she snapped, though her ears went pink. "Actually, I'd vote for Neville," Luna piped up, more eager than ethereal. "No way," Hermione hissed. Then, turning back to Ryan, she threw up her hands in mock exasperation. "Ryan is mine!" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "What's going on here?" He wasn't used to this mortal drama, romantic rivalries, and all the rest. Although, he decided to experience life through a human perspective. Beneath the facade, he was still fully alert. Adopting a mortal mindset was meant for joy, not for chaos. Hermione sighed, softening her tone. "Neville, he saw me practicing the spell you gave me." Neville nodded, cheeks still pink. "I wanted to learn it too." Ryan studied them both for a moment, then allowed himself the tiniest smile. Despite the unexpected squabbles, perhaps this was exactly the kind of adventure he'd been hoping to have. "I wonder if you can do it too, just like you did with Harry," Hermione teased, wrapping her arms around Ryan's left elbow and giving it a playful squeeze. At her words, a memory unfurled in Ryan's mind. 40 minutes earlier, on the 5th floor of Hogwarts. He saw a nearly empty classroom, chairs pushed back against the walls, and in the center stood a young witch with her hair in a tangled mess. Clutched in her hands was a thick, beige-covered book. She was muttering one-word commands in English: fly, wind, jump, sword, read, as if rehearsing vocabulary, yet the effect was anything but academic. Without the flourish of a wand or any elaborate gestures, Hermione's terse commands brought the training dummies strewn about the room to life. They obeyed instantly. The straw-stuffed figures vaulted into the air, spun in invisible gusts, brandished phantom blades, or opened their hollow mouths in silent cries. The magic was raw but precise, powered only by the witch's firm voice and the simplest of words. Hermione's brow was furrowed in concentration when the door crashed open. Neville Longbottom entered unannounced, his heavy gait betraying the urgency of someone who has just followed a trail of magical vibrations. His round face wore an expression of both surprise and curiosity as he took in the animated dummies. Beside her, Hermione hesitated, momentarily shaken out of her focus. Neville's uncanny ability to detect even the faintest experiment, and his habit of bursting in at the worst possible moment, had again spoiled her practice session. Back in the present, Hermione straightened up and flashed Ryan a sheepish grin. "Don't look so smug, Ryan. You still have to give it a try." She tapped the book against her palm, her eyes sparkling with challenge. Ryan swallowed. Watching Hermione command those dummies so effortlessly had left him both awed and a little intimidated. Still, if she believed he could do it, well, he wasn't about to back down. He nodded. "All right, teach me." Hermione's smile widened into something triumphant. "Just repeat after me," she said, opening the thick book to the first page of basic commands. "Fly." Ryan took a deep breath, readying himself for his first true lesson in English, at least the kind that made things take flight. Hermione slipped quietly into the deserted corner of the library, the soft glow of her wand illuminating the pages of an unfamiliar book. Neville Longbottom paused at the entrance to the restricted section, jaw-dropping as he watched her. He'd known Hermione for years, her brilliance, her discipline, but he'd never seen her magic laid out with such effortless precision. Each spell she practiced tonight was so deceptively simple. A barely whispered incantation, a graceful flick of her wrist, and a spark of violet light would dance through the air. Neville's eyes widened. There was something different here, something almost playful. He crept closer and recognized the cover at once, a leather-bound grimoire embossed with an elegant, looping R. It was the very book Ryan had compiled 3 years ago, inspired by the magical lore of Cardcaptor Sakura. Rumor had it that Ryan had rewritten every charm within those original tomes, distilling them, stripping away convoluted pronunciations, intricate gestures, even the mental toughness that conventional spells demanded. In his hands, the fanciful spells had become remarkably accessible. Hermione, of course, knew all of this. From the moment she'd found Ryan's grimoire, tucked away in an old trunk, the logic behind her sudden mastery clicked into place. She still practiced diligently, perfecting her concentration and refining her wand work, but the foundational knowledge lay clear and ready whenever she opened its pages. Neville pressed himself against a bookshelf, torn between awe and envy. Why didn't he simply ask Professor Flitwick or Madame Pomfrey to teach him? He shook his head. Hogwarts teachers, for all their patience, rarely offered up forbidden knowledge, or anything they deemed too advanced, to students who hadn't earned it. That left Neville with only one option, Hermione. She paused, startled, as Neville cleared his throat. Her cheeks flushed, but she offered him a small, guilty smile. "I didn't expect you to be here," she stammered, snapping the grimoire shut. He stepped forward, excitement buzzing in his chest. "Hermione, that's Ryan's book, isn't it? How are you doing all these spells so easily?" Hermione clasped the grimoire to her chest. "It's a long story," she admitted. "Ryan adapted these spells years ago. He simplified the words, the movements, even the thought processes behind them. I figured out why they feel so natural the moment I opened the book, but I still need practice if I'm ever going to cast them perfectly." Neville's determination flared. "Then let me help. I want to learn every one of them." Hermione hesitated. She knew the power contained in those pages, and the danger of unleashing it without proper care. Yet, as she looked into Neville's eager eyes, she recognized the same hunger for growth that had driven her own studies. "All right," she said softly, "but we'll practice in secret. If anyone finds out—" "I won't say a word," Neville promised. Under the hush of Hogwarts's ancient shelves, two friends bent over a magical grimoire, ready to push the boundaries of their abilities, one carefully simplified spell at a time. Parents weren't refusing out of arrogance, but out of deep concern for their children's safety. The advanced knowledge those supermodel disciplines conferred carried real dangers, and most families preferred to wait until a student's 7th year, when they were more mature and legally adults, before allowing them to delve into such risks. Hermione's decision to grant Neville's request, however, was driven by her own guilt. She felt ashamed for having misjudged Neville's intentions and for making snap accusations. As a Muggle-born facing the son of Britain's greatest hero, her conscience pricked her all the more. True to her kind nature, she finally relented. "All right," she whispered, "I promise." Ryan studied Neville thoughtfully. "What do you want to learn?" he asked. After all, they shared a similar heritage, neither as close as Ryan's bond with Harry, but closer than Ron. Rather than prescribe a specific path, Ryan chose to set a series of magical puzzles before Neville. He wanted to watch which challenges resonated with him, hoping that the solutions would reveal the branch of magic best suited to Neville's talents. Ryan gave a single wave of his hand. The spellbook Hermione was holding snapped open and lifted itself into the air, its pages fluttering like a wounded bird. One by one, cards engraved with unfamiliar magical sigils floated forth, hanging in the space between them. Ryan turned to Neville, eyes bright with anticipation. Could Neville choose the spell card that would serve him best? Chapter 191. Powers Voldemort Does Not Understand. Snow drifted lazily across the winter sky above Hogwarts, turning its once blue expanse into a tapestry of crystal white. Neville Longbottom felt a similar calm settle around him as he stood amid a circle of floating cards, each one humming with a different power. Some glowed with razor-sharp energy, others exuded unbreakable stability, and a few pulsed with bright intelligence. Every card seemed poised to become his ultimate trump. Taking a steadying breath, Neville withdrew his cherrywood wand and laid it flat across his open palm. "Point me," he whispered. The wand quivered, then rose upright, pivoting in midair until it hovered over a metal-inscribed card. In a single fluid motion, Neville's free hand snapped out and plucked it from the swirling array. "A sword?" he murmured, staring at the card's etched hilt. Almost immediately, a clear, ringing clang echoed through the courtyard. The other cards vanished in a flash of light, and where the metal card had hung, a strange 2-foot-long blade appeared in Neville's grasp. Its surface gleamed with an indigo sheen, and runes traced along the fuller glowed faintly. Neville turned the sword over in his hands, testing its weight and balance. The cold metal felt surprisingly alive, thrumming with dormant power. He frowned thoughtfully. "I've never seen a blade like this before," he said softly. Yet, despite its unfamiliarity, he sensed that this was exactly the weapon he needed. Whatever lay ahead, this indigo sword would be his answer to the dark forces Voldemort could never comprehend. Neville hefted the blade, and was surprised by how light it felt. In the dim glow of drifting snowflakes, he noticed smooth, cloud-like runes glimmering along its length. "Looks like you drew the sword card," Ryan observed, eyes alight with interest. Neville turned the sword over in his hands. "I never would have guessed you'd repurpose the direction spell for this." Ryan's lips curved into a proud smile. "Most wizards use that spell as a compass. You place your wand in your palm, recite the incantation, and it spins to point true north. It's about as simple as magic gets. But you've discovered its truest application." He leaned in to explain. The sword card, or lightsaber spell, started as a low-level variant of my Shadowless God enchantment, which I originally designed to mimic a Star Wars-style lightsaber. Unlike Shadowless God, which conjures an invisible blade laced with a venom that prevents wounds from healing, this version forges pure magic into a visible energy sword around your wand's hilt. For a level 6 demigod wizard like me, inventing spells that simple is just child's play. The lightsaber spell had become almost metaphysical, a blade born of pure intention, one that severed only what its caster willed. You could thrust it through an enemy's breastplate and stop at the fabric, or, as Ryan often demonstrated, slice through an invisible curse in midair without leaving a mark on anything else. "I just ran a little test," Ryan said, flexing his wrist so the blade pulsed and thinned. "If the Point Me North charm can pinpoint true north, why can't it find the direction of my own heart? After dozens of tries, all it ever led me to was that stupid bubblegum wrapper I lost." Neville's shoulders slumped. He knew exactly why Ryan mentioned the wrapper. Neville's mother, brilliant but unorthodox, insisted that those crumpled pieces of chewing gum foil were the greatest treasures in the world. Neville still clutched every one she'd ever saved for him. He exhaled slowly and looked back at the lightsaber. The luminous blade had already shrunk to half its length, flickering like a dying ember. "This thing, what's happening? Can't you see it's getting smaller?" Ryan nodded. The floating spellbook, which had been hovering of its own accord, drifted gently back into Hermione's outstretched hands. "It's not a physical weapon, so it can't harm her book. It's the crystallized merger of my magical theory with your raw instinctive power." He laid a hand on Neville's shoulder. "Eventually the blade will vanish entirely. That's when you'll know the enchantment's complete. For now," he smiled, "you both need some sleep." Neville stared at the empty hilt in his palm. "Sleep?" he echoed, bewildered. "Exactly," Ryan said. "Magic's strongest when you're well rested." With that, the three of them turned away from the practice hall, already looking forward to dreams free of flickering spells and elusive hearts. Neville stood frozen in the corridor, lost in thought, so Ryan, Hermione, and Luna slipped past him and made their way back toward Hogwarts Castle. It was well into lunch hour by now, and the great stone hallways were almost empty, their own footsteps echoing off the walls. "He's thinking about his mother," Luna said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze in the stillness. Hermione peeked around Ryan's shoulder. "How can you be so sure?" she asked. Luna paused, brow creasing. "It's something I recognize. That distant look, I've seen it before." Hermione opened her mouth to press further, but Ryan's steady glance warned her off. He stepped forward and shifted the subject. "About Neville's plan. What should we do with the warding charm?" Hermione, who had been poring over the ancient spellbook all morning, brightened. "We could simply transfigure it into a sword," she suggested. "It's quick, uses less magic, and would be easy to wield." "Transfiguration works," Luna agreed. "It's more efficient, and once you master the form, you can leave it as a solid object without expending energy to maintain a charm." Hermione nodded, eyes sparkling. "Exactly. A permanent transfiguration would free up our magic for other protective spells." Ryan gave a curt nod, then closed his mouth. He wasn't going to let them dig any deeper just yet. "All right," he said. "We'll finalize the spell after lunch. Let's get moving before someone notices we're late." They fell into step again down the deserted corridor, thoughts of swords and spells temporarily set aside as they headed back to the castle's great dining hall. Ryan's voice dropped to a whisper, drawing every listener closer. "You may remember I once said that Neville Longbottom is actually the chosen child named in the prophecy. Every child born under those exact stars, and at that precise moment, carries a type of magic Voldemort simply cannot comprehend." He paused, leaning back against the cold stone of the hearth. "Harry Potter's gift was the magic of love," he said softly, "and mine," he tapped the arm of his chair, "is the power to hide, to vanish from the world and isolate myself completely. But Neville's gift is unlike either of ours. His magic is the ability to reject magic, to shut it out, even to escape reality when it overwhelms him." Ryan's eyes grew distant, as though he were watching memories play out before him. "Of course, these aren't powers we're born with. They're forged by deeper forces. Harry's strength sprang from his mother's selfless sacrifice. I inherited mine through the Smith lineage, an ancestral legacy. Neville's, however, was born of despair. His parents, driven to madness by grief, convinced themselves he was merely a squib. That overwhelming despair awakened his ability to repel magic." He exhaled slowly, meeting everyone's gaze in turn. "I learned this truth not long after becoming Neville's roommate. It explained why, as a child, he never showed the slightest spark of wizardry. He could will his blankets to wrap tighter and hide the magic inside. And when Voldemort once trapped him with the full-body binding curse, it was Neville's iron refusal to submit that broke the spell." A faint smile touched Ryan's lips. "But those tales," he added, "are for another night." Neville seized his chance, plunged the sword of Gryffindor out of the smoking sorting hat, and drove it through Nagini, Voldemort's last Horcrux. In that moment, he earned the title of Gryffindor Swordmaster. It all sounds straightforward, but his true power came from something far stranger. Neville's complete rejection of conventional magic. In the original timeline, even with his father's wand in hand, his skill was no better than a squib's. He struggled so badly in class that during his second year, when Slytherin's sympathizers set a monster loose in the Chamber of Secrets to purge Muggleborns, his pureblood status offered no protection. They scorned him as utterly inept, a pariah too weak to defend himself. Hermione, watching Neville now, furrowed her brow. "What does that sword card actually do?" she asked. "Sharpen the blade?" She'd grown used to Neville's idiosyncratic magic, but this was new even for her. She still couldn't see the card's purpose. "It's a bit like the way Ron channels his emotions into a spell," Harry offered, recalling how Ron's Patronus had once burst from him in a surge of feeling. Neville smiled. "Actually, this one holds a lightsaber enchantment. I just tune it by willing the sword to take on the properties I need." He lifted the silver-edged blade. At his command, it gleamed with a pale light. Then, with a single fluid swing, he cleaved a hissing jet of green magic in two, as cleanly as if he'd cut through silk. Hermione's eyes went wide. "He really sliced right through it," she breathed, and for the first time she understood. Neville's strength lay not in spell recitation or wand work, but in the living bond he'd formed with his sword, and the mysterious cards that let him shape its magic from thought alone. "No, at first I thought I'd simply misjudged my reflexes," Ryan said, shaking his head in disbelief. Hermione's eyes locked onto Neville. He'd just taken several spells at point-blank range, yet he stood perfectly still, utterly unharmed. Luna, meanwhile, seemed miles away, lost in her own private reverie. Ryan glanced from Neville back to Hermione. "What you're seeing is the aftermath of those curses," he explained quietly. "Neville should be bruised, maybe worse, but he's exactly the same as before. No reaction at all." Hermione's mouth fell open, her mind racing to reconcile what she'd expected with the impossible sight before her. Luna alone remained serene, her thoughts drifting beyond the walls of the practice room, indifferent to the astonishment around her. Chapter 4:16. Neville the Spellbreaker. Hermione's mind raced as she watched Neville stand firm against the onslaught of curses and hexes. Swords are meant for attack, and shields for defense, yet Neville had somehow become both blade and barrier in one living form. With his innate resistance to most magic and the newly mastered lightsaber charm, he could literally absorb and annihilate incoming spells with his very flesh. The lightsaber charm isn't just about summoning an ethereal sword, Ryan explained, leaning closer so only Hermione could hear. It disrupts magic at its source, tearing apart any spell it contacts. Hermione frowned. And Neville's special gift, his remarkable spell immunity, lowers the barrier to dismantling magic on contact? Exactly, Ryan nodded. But here's the real trick. Does the charm even need to form a separate blade outside his body? Why must he manifest it externally? Ryan's eyes sparkled with excitement. Why not become the blade himself? Hermione's realization hit her like a lightning bolt. So every jinx or curse aimed at Neville is shattered against his sword hand, his arm itself acting as the weapon. Right, Ryan grinned. He doesn't carry a shield or conjure a floating sword. He transforms his own limb into a living blade. Incoming magic doesn't bounce off. It's ripped apart the moment it touches him. He's the very embodiment of that legendary sword body you read about in fantasy novels, both offense and defense rolled into one. On the field, Neville's silhouette gleamed with arcane energy. Each time an enemy spell crested toward him, it disintegrated the instant it struck his arm. With every swing of his hand, he cleaved spells in two, an unstoppable spellbreaker whose existence alone turned the tide of any battle. This ability is actually very similar to the body transformation skill that Ryan uses, but Neville's version doesn't boost his strength or speed. His tremendous magic resistance comes simply from nullifying every spell that touches him. In Western fantasy terms, he's effectively become a spellbreaker. But that means he has to spend his own magic power to destroy spells, Hermione said thoughtfully. If too many enchantments strike him at once, he won't have enough energy to fuel his anti-magic blade, and his lightsaber-like spell will fail. For any wizard whose reserves are roughly equivalent to a muggle's physical strength, that could lead to total collapse from exhaustion, Ryan added. Hermione nodded. It really is a double-edged sword. On one hand, he can choose exactly which spells will affect him. On the other, he risks burning himself out if he tries to block everything. And Neville's no fool. He wouldn't reject every spell indiscriminately, Ryan said. Putting herself in Neville's place, Hermione realized he'd actually gained nothing but advantages from this change. There simply aren't any real downsides for him. Ryan leaned back, crossing his arms. It's exactly as you said. The lightsaber charm can sever only what the caster intends. It's almost like choosing which enemy spells you allow yourself to counter. Hermione nodded thoughtfully. True, but to pull that off you need an instinctive mastery of magic, being able to select which spells to resist and which to let pass. Ryan shook his head. Neville simply doesn't have that instinct. He'd have to memorize hundreds of standard spells, identify each one by its magical signature, the opponent's gestures, and the exact incantation. He's not the blundering fool people make him out to be, but he's no Hermione Granger either. She offered a wry smile. Granted, of course, this is all conjecture on my part. It'll be years before he reaches that level, Ryan admitted. Neville's power is exceptional, magic against magic, born from the despair he felt as a child, watching his parents suffer under dark curses. He's managed to condense that raw force into a sword-like form, which shows just how potent it is. Yet that very nature also becomes a barrier, preventing him from refining spells like the lightsaber charm any further. Only when he truly masters this unique magic will Voldemort and his Death Eaters finally be finished. Here's a polished, coherent version of the chapter. In truth, if Neville Longbottom really wanted to maximize his combat effectiveness, he'd do well to train in the methods of medieval witch hunters, warriors who regarded magic itself as an abomination and devoted themselves to pure physical conditioning. Had Neville adopted that ruthless regimen, it's quite possible he could have slain Bellatrix Lestrange and taken out her husband and brother-in-law, and even subdued Bartemius Crouch Jr. before Voldemort ever hit the ground. But when we consider the famous prophecy, an even more intriguing design emerges. To bring down Voldemort, the three children of the prophecy must each follow a uniquely tailored path. Harry Potter, blessed with the power of love, is destined to become the ultimate white wizard. His mastery of benevolent magic will be the key to Voldemort's undoing. Neville Longbottom, gifted with the rare power to nullify magic, is the perfect choice for a melee combat specialist. Through intense physical transformation, rendering himself virtually immune to spells, he could plunge into the heart of battle and cleave Voldemort's head from his shoulders with a single swing of the blade. Ryan, the one who never traveled through time, harboring a latent magical potential, is cut out to be an assassin. Joining forces with the mysterious Black Knight, he would strike from the shadows, picking off his targets from afar with lethal precision. In other words, for Voldemort to survive the full scope of that prophecy, he would have to master every form of combat: close-quarters swordplay, raw magical force, and long-range marksmanship. Only by becoming peerless in all three disciplines could he possibly outmaneuver the trio destined to destroy him. This version preserves all key points and characters while presenting the ideas in clear, natural English. However, whoever claimed this prophecy was a curse aimed at Voldemort. He murdered Peverell, acknowledged by the god of death, and because Voldemort himself shares that very identity, he has violated the most sacred of laws. No blood relation may slay another. In that light, it makes perfect sense that the one true living god of death, now ascended to a divine plane, would set her sights on him. Meanwhile, on the 8th floor of Hogwarts, Lavender Brown and Parvati Patil were hunting for the divination classroom. "The North Tower should be down this corridor," Parvati muttered, her eyes flicking over the cold stone walls. Lavender frowned. "Are you sure Professor Trelawney's in the divination classroom? Why not the Great Hall? It's lunchtime." Parvati shrugged. "Divination's a separate subject. She wouldn't teach it among the house tables." Lavender bit her lip. "What if she's holed up in the staff room on the 1st floor?" They pressed on until they reached a small, unfamiliar landing. The only adornment here was a single, oversized portrait painted directly onto the stone, a boundless grassland under a cloudless sky, the blades of grass bending as though caught in a silent wind. "I've never seen this here before," Lavender said, craning her neck. Parvati stepped closer, studying the image. "It must mark the entrance. Come on, let's see if there's a hidden door." Together, they began to trace the edges of the mural, hopeful that beyond it lay the fated divination classroom and Professor Trelawney. Parvati paused at the end of the corridor, her eyes bright with excitement. "Professor Trelawney is different," she whispered to Lavender as they walked. "She never leaves the divination classroom. In fact, she lives there, up in that tiny room above the little spiral staircase." Lavender frowned. "You really think she's been holed up there all this time? I barely caught a glimpse of her, and only at the start or end of term feasts." Parvati waved her sister on. "Except for special occasions, she never shows up in the main hall. Didn't you notice?" Their footsteps echoed on the stone floor until Parvati came to a sudden halt before a faded portrait of a row of ladies in crinoline skirts. She pointed. "Here, behind this." Lavender swallowed nervously. "Or we could turn back now. I'm still feeling dizzy from those potion fumes." "Nonsense," Parvati insisted, already tugging at the frame. It swung inward to reveal a spiral staircase hidden in the wall. Reluctantly, Lavender followed. The narrow steps curled upward until they emerged onto a small landing, completely devoid of doors or windows. Lavender blinked, about to protest, when a silvery ladder materialized at their feet, rising as if by enchantment. Together they craned their necks upward, spotting a circular hatch in the ceiling. A worn bronze plaque gleamed in the dim light. "Sybil Trelawney, Divination Teacher." Parvati's grin was triumphant. "Welcome to Professor Trelawney's private sanctum." "Here we are," Parvati announced, her eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Lavender Cheltenham followed close behind, glancing up at the looming spire of the divination tower. "Professor Trelawney must have known we were coming," Parvati added, practically bouncing with excitement. On impulse, she broke into a little dance, a custom from her hometown to invite good luck. Lavender cleared her throat. "Are we really going up there?" Parvati's grin faltered. What if that vision wasn't just a dream? Lavender bit her lip, twisting the edge of her scarf. "I still want to keep my distance from Ron," she admitted, "but in reality, he's nothing like the boy in my nightmare." She swallowed hard and gave the ancient door a nervous tap. "So, shall we?" Chapter 193, Detective Lavender Takes Action. Sometimes a room's layout can reveal more about its owner than any biography could. As Lavender stepped into Professor Trelawney's divination classroom, she felt certain Sybil Trelawney was even more eccentric than rumors suggested. This space hardly resembled a classroom. It was as if an old attic had collided with a Victorian tier room. 20 small, round tables crowded the floor, each surrounded by overstuffed armchairs upholstered in vibrant Indian prints. Heavy curtains were drawn against the windows, and every lamp wore a deep crimson shade, bathing the room in a muted scarlet glow. The fire in the hearth crackled merrily, a large copper kettle suspended above it. The flames licked its base, sending a faint, greasy aroma drifting through the air, mixing oddly with the mustiness of forgotten relics. Along the circular walls, shelves overflowed with dusty feathers, half-burned candle stubs, tattered playing cards, and dozens of silver crystal balls. A mountain of delicate china tea sets teetered on one shelf as if awaiting their next ceremony. The overall effect was warm, yet oppressively uncanny, like stepping into a relic of bygone mysticism. Lavender paused, taking it all in. She'd heard whispers of a hidden room above the divination classroom, and now she scanned the high ceiling for telltale signs of a secret doorway. "Is she upstairs?" she murmured. Her eyes traced the beams overhead, alert for any clue that would lead her to the elusive professor. A soft, indistinct voice drifted from the shadows. "Welcome," it whispered. "It's wonderful to finally meet you in the world of the living." Lavender staggered back as a tiny, glowing form floated into view. Her heart pounded. "Sit down, my dear. Sit down," the creature crooned. Blinking in disbelief, Lavender realized it wasn't an insect at all, but a person. Professor Sybil Trelawney. The divination teacher emerged fully into the firelight, her frail figure framed by dancing shadows. Trelawney's oversized spectacles magnified her wide, knowing eyes, and a delicate, glittering shawl of sheer gauze draped around her shoulders. Countless beads and amulets tinkled at her throat, and slender wrists were weighted with bracelets and rings. She squinted at Lavender and her companion, as though she had sensed their arrival long before they spoke. Lavender's fear gave way to curiosity. Professor Trelawney's airs of otherworldly power now seemed more theatrical than formidable. On a small table to the professor's right stood a freshly brewed cup of tea, its fragrant steam curling toward the tense low ceiling. "You've come at last," Trelawney murmured, her voice both warm and distant. "Let us see what the fates have in store." The deep indentations pressed into the overstuffed armchairs told Lavender someone had only just risen from them. She half expected the gaunt figure of Professor Trelawney to slip down the stairs and melt into the shadows at any moment. So sure was she that the seer would rather hide than welcome visitors. Parvati, by contrast, could hardly contain her delight. She offered a tremulous, reverent smile to the professor, then clambered onto one of the cushioned seats and settled into the plush depths. "Welcome," Professor Trelawney intoned, her voice soft yet commanding. Before Lavender could collect her thoughts, the professor, pale hands fluttering like moth wings, guided her to the empty armchair beside Parvati. Still clutching a steaming teacup, Trelawney then glided to her usual spot, a high-backed chair before the crackling fireplace. Once comfortably seated, the professor raised her cup and fixed the girls with an intense stare. "I am Professor Trelawney," she began, her tone both solemn and theatrical. "You may not have encountered me before. Oftentimes the relentless pace of Hogwarts life dulls my third eye." Parvati's eyes glistened with tears of excitement, her breath catching in a whisper of wonder. Lavender Moonstone settled into her seat across from Professor Trelawney, watching her teacher's every move. Whenever Trelawney spoke, she deliberately dragged out her words, as though inviting closer scrutiny. And the way her great shawl was draped, it hid the upper half of her face, her eyes invisible, making it impossible to gauge her true expression. Lavender recognized the bit of theatrics for what it was, a ruse. Calmly, Lavender kept her face blank, her hands curled into fists in her lap. She determined to play along. After all, it couldn't be that hard. She'd seen Parvati do it. Surely an expert like herself could feign the exact same bewitchment. Professor Trelawney flicked her shawl into place and leaned forward. Her voice dropped to a low murmur. "You are confused." Parvati Patil broke into delighted applause. The grand decor of rich tapestries and tucked-away brass charms all evoking Trelawney's far-off Indian heritage, only confirmed in Parvati's mind that the prophecy must be genuine. "You girl." Trelawney's gaze fixed on Lavender, her thick lashes lifting just enough to reveal her narrowed eyes. "This confusion comes from you." Lavender let out a shaky breath and allowed her hands to tremble theatrically. Parvati whooped in excitement, practically bouncing in her seat. "I told you!" Parvati exclaimed. "You saw it all, didn't you, Professor?" Trelawney inclined her head, motioning with a crooked finger. "Yes, I did. I've got to be in your class next year." Parvati gushed to Trelawney, eyes gleaming with admiration. Lavender breathed slowly and let her poker face drop into a small, triumphant smile. Detective Lavender was on the case, and no one would uncover her secret. "You are still only sophomores," Professor Trelawney's soft, distant voice drifted across the dimly lit classroom. Parvati Patil nodded, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Yes, Professor." Beside her, Lavender Brown's jaw clenched. Why had her own sister, now a Ravenclaw, risen above her, while here was Parvati, boldly proclaiming she would select next year's courses? As Lavender seethed, Parvati quietly revealed details from her dream, details no ordinary student could possibly know. "Excellent," Trelawney said, her wide eyes gleaming. "It appears you are indeed worthy of the most demanding of all magical disciplines, divination." Parvati's shoulders straightened with pride. "But," the professor added, her tone growing grave, "if you lack true vision, my instruction can only carry you so far. Books alone are insufficient." She paused, casting Lavender a curious, assessing glance that made the brown-haired girl shift uncomfortably in her seat. Then, smoothing her shawl, Trelawney leaned toward Parvati, her voice lowering to a confidential whisper. Lavender realized, with a pang of recognition, that the professor saw her and Parvati as the same kind of imposter, each desperate to prove herself. The warning to Parvati was not just cautionary, it was a carefully placed distraction, a reminder of Trelawney's own power in this classroom. As Parvati listened intently, Lavender sat back, determined to show she was more than a disappointed second year. The season of divination was just beginning, and so were the challenges they would all face. Professor Trelawney suddenly sank back into her chair, a serene smile spreading across her face, as if she'd just uncovered the very reason behind Lavender's earlier odd behavior. Lavender felt her cheeks burn. The seer had seen right through her feigned composure. If Trelawney was a fraud, she was certainly a formidable one. "Professor," Lavender said, her voice barely above a whisper, "you still haven't told me what my dream means." Parvati sat up, eyes shining with excitement. "Do you think Lavender should reach out to Ron?" "Please," Parvati continued as Lavender flushed deeper, "that's what she's thinking of most." Even in a moment when Lavender had been subtly outmaneuvered by Trelawney, Parvati's concern remained unwavering. Trelawney regarded Lavender with a kindly, almost indulgent expression. "My dear, I believe your dream was a warning sent by your own gift, your second sight. Unfortunately, because your vision isn't as finely tuned as mine, the images came through in disjointed, confusing fragments." Chapter 194, New Prophecy and the Werewolf. Late afternoon light filtered through the dusty windows of the divination tower as Lavender Brown paced in front of Professor Trelawney's tea-stained table. At last she stopped, her cheeks flushed with worry. "Should I reach out to Ron?" she asked softly. Professor Trelawney peered over her oversized spectacles, her misty eyes narrowing. "He's steady, reliable, and he clearly cares for you," she said, voice low but warm. "But love is never certain. Even a true prophet can't foretell every heartbreak." Lavender bit her lip. "So, what do I do? Do I chase after it? Or do I run away before I get hurt?" The question made Trelawney sigh. She tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, surprised at how deeply Lavender's uncertainty struck her. From the very beginning, she realized this wasn't a cheap trick to show off her gift. Lavender was genuinely torn, unsure whether to embrace the possibility of first love or protect herself from its sting. "I understand your confusion," Trelawney admitted, her theatrical whisper gone. "Love thrives on hope and courage. To accept it fully is to risk pain, but without that risk, you'll never know its joys." Lavender's eyes glittered. "But what if it all falls apart?" The professor's expression softened. She pushed aside her shawl, leaning forward with a rare, earnest look. "You're young, Lavender. You have friends who care about you. Even if things don't work out with Ron, you won't face it alone. Sometimes a beautiful failure, shared with those you love, is better than a safe solitude. Lavender closed her eyes, drawing in a steady breath. In that moment, Trelawney realized her own truth. She had hidden her fears once, refusing to admit them even to her closest friends. If only she'd been braver, she thought, she might have discovered a different kind of strength, the kind found in honest hearts supporting one another. Lavender opened her eyes, resolve shining there. "Thank you, Professor. I think I'll call him." Trelawney smiled, unusual warmth spreading through her. "Do so, my dear. Fate may guide us, but it is our courage that shapes the path." Chapter X, Midsummer Portents. Professor Trelawney's eyes glimmered with empathy as she guided Lavender aside. "You don't have to face this alone," she said softly. "Your life stretches out before you. Promise me you'll never make a choice you'll regret." Lavender's gaze wavered, but Trelawney smiled gently. "Take courage, little Gryffindor lion." She laid a comforting hand on Lavender's shoulder, and for a moment Lavender stood as if she'd forgotten how to receive kindness. Then, with sudden warmth, Lavender threw her arms around the professor. "You're the greatest seer," she exclaimed. In Lavender's mind, a prophet who offered hope was worth more than the sternest, omniscient warnings. Sometimes compassion, she believed, was the best magic of all. Parvati Patil watched, puzzled. Here stood the divination teacher of Hogwarts, the most celebrated seer in the wizarding world. Wouldn't her powers be unmatched? How long had she studied the art of prediction, if not to inspire courage as well as foretell fate? At last, Lavender and Parvati turned to descend the spiral staircase. Trelawney's voice fell to a whisper as she watched them go. "May love no longer trouble you next time we meet." The flickering firelight danced off her long emerald earrings, lending her an almost mystical glow. Before anyone could reply, the chamber echoed with a low, hoarse voice. It was on the height of midsummer that the true vision came. Startled, Trelawney whirled around. The voice was hers, and yet impossibly different, deeper and rasping. Silence enveloped the room as the professor prepared to confront this unexpected second self. Professor Trelawney sat stiffly in her armchair, her gaze unfocused, her chin drooping as her eyes flickered wildly, as though she were seizing. In a ragged whisper that was nothing like her usual dreamy drawl, she intoned, "At the convergence of the three great schools of magic, the spirit of Fiendfire will be reborn. The resurrection stone shall be restored. The boy whose power the Dark Lord cannot fathom will stand deep within the Forbidden Wing, under the Dark Lord's very nose. And the woman who first bestowed that power upon him, after eluding the Dark Lord 3 times, will return to our world once more." Her head lolled against her chest. She snorted softly. Then, in an instant, she jerked upward, as though slapping herself back to attention. "Goodness, have I wandered off in my own fog again?" She blinked rapidly and gave a small, embarrassed shake of her head. Outside, snow drifted gently across the grounds near the humping willow. A short distance away, Ryan and Luna stood beneath the gnarled branches, watching the flakes swirl. Ryan's gaze flicked upward toward the peak of the North Tower, as though he'd felt a chill of premonition. "What is it?" Luna asked, her voice muffled by the white fur of her hat as she burrowed closer into Ryan's side. He rested his chin on her head, a rueful smile in his eyes. "Trelawney just spoke of someone I know, and another figure both admirable and, well, somewhat detestable." He sighed, meeting Luna's curious look. "Her prophecies never fail to unsettle me." Luna tightened her scarf. "Then perhaps we should keep a close watch on both of them." Ryan nodded, turning back toward the castle, where ominous secrets were already stirring. "Oh, Ryan, please go on. Tell me more about the Homping Willow's history." Luna leaned forward, satisfied that Ryan hadn't rushed off or hidden anything. If Hermione were here, she'd be peppering him with questions by now. Indeed, Ryan couldn't help but think of Hermione, tucked away in the room of requirement, searching for his magic book. Ryan cleared his throat. "Well, speaking of the Homping Willow, there's one person central to its story, our Defense Against the Dark Arts Associate Professor, Remus Lupin." "Lupin?" Luna echoed, her voice low. "He's that quiet, haunted type everyone feels sorry for. Half the school doesn't even know how to treat him." "Do you know why?" Ryan asked, eyes drifting to the ancient tree outside the window. "He's a werewolf," Luna whispered, as though the words were too heavy for the air. Exactly. Ryan leaned in. When Lupin arrived at Hogwarts as a student, the staff planted the Humping Willow over a hidden tunnel. This kept inquisitive classmates from stumbling on the passage beneath its roots. On full moons, Lupin could slip unnoticed through that tunnel to the Shrieking Shack, where he'd spend the night in solitude. Luna's gaze softened. He must be in terrible pain every month. Werewolves are highly contagious, Ryan agreed quietly. A bite can bleed without end unless you know the right magical remedies. It's a cruel punishment, to be feared, and yet to live with the monster inside you. Luna nodded, lost in thought as the Humping Willow's branches scraped the castle wall, a living reminder of the sacrifices made for some, and the mysteries still waiting to be unraveled. Muggles and wizards who are bitten by a werewolf in wolf form during a full moon risk becoming werewolves themselves. If, immediately after the attack, the fresh wounds are treated with a paste of silver powder and distilled water and allowed to heal, the victim will contract lycanthropy. Werewolf bites aren't mere maulings, they're infections. The moment the beast's saliva mingles with human blood under a full moon, the curse takes hold. But beyond the danger of infection, the greater dread lies in the inevitable loss of control. Every full moon without fail, a werewolf undergoes an involuntary transformation. Their human consciousness vanishes. They become the wolf completely, driven by primal instinct. In that state, they do not recognize friend from foe, and some even kill their closest companions. Only when the moon wanes and they revert to human form do they recall every brutal detail of their actions. This cruel duality, kindness and reason for 3 weeks, deadly savagery for one, make as werewolves outcasts. No one can truly trust someone who knows deep down they might turn on you under the next full moon. To be continued. Luna sat by the edge of the clearing, her wand laid forgotten in her lap, as Ryan spoke in a low, urgent voice. When 2 werewolves mate in wolf form under a full moon, he began, something extraordinary, almost unbelievable, can occur. On only 2 recorded occasions in history, such couplings have produced litters of genuine wolf cubs. These cubs grow into stunningly beautiful wolves, indistinguishable from their wild brethren, yet they possess a wisdom that borders on human. Luna's eyes widened. And there really are such cubs in the Forbidden Forest? Ryan nodded. I've spent years tracking every whisper and footprint in those woods. The legend is true. Somewhere in the heart of the forest, a pack of these lupine offspring roams free. That's the kernel behind all the tales at Hogwarts, why students swear they've heard wolves on moonlit nights. He paused, running a hand through his hair. To be clear, there are also entirely normal werewolves in the forest, creatures who shift only on full moons, keep their distance, and never bark unless driven by lunar madness. They shelter themselves deep within, far from any boundary. They're not responsible for the rumors that drift through the castle's corridors. Luna drew in a slow breath. As a witch, she knew her peers would recoil at the idea of werewolves so close to their school. She had barely spoken to Professor Lupin and well understood the peril his condition posed. Yet, instead of fear or disgust, she felt a strange tug of sympathy at the thought of him. She pictured his weary smile, the loneliness in his pale eyes, the price he paid each month when the moon rose full and silver. Something in her heart softened. Whatever the truth behind those rumors, whatever danger lurked in the Forbidden Forest, she couldn't bring herself to dread the creatures whose fate was bound to that of her gentle, tormented professor. Ryan felt a sudden twinge of jealousy. Luna caught his eye and turned toward him. "What's the matter?" she asked. "I'm about to do something really amazing, and it could make your dad famous again." Ryan snorted. "Oh yeah?" Luna blinked, puzzled. "Why are you upset? I thought you'd be happy." He looked away, heart pounding. If only there were a charm to strip away the curse of lycanthropy, something that would neutralize a werewolf's danger and let him shift forms freely, just like an animagus. Would the full moon still hold any terror then? Remus Lupin knew that misery better than anyone, suffering month after month under its grip. Damn Lupin, and damn this relentless, painful fate. Chapter 195, The Late Daily Prophet. Winter had quietly departed Hogwarts, and a warm spring sun now bathed the grounds in light. The once endless blanket of snow had melted away, its icy remnants seeping into the earth like life-giving nectar and reviving soil long starved of sunlight. Inside the great hall, the enchanted ceiling mirrored the clear blue sky, infusing a fresh clarity into the drowsy morning. Even Ron, grumbling over the early hour, found himself relaxing as he piled bacon, bread, and fried eggs onto his plate and tucked in. Halfway through a hearty mouthful, Ron began to cough, startled by the sight of Ginny curled up comfortably in Harry's arms, completely unfazed by the curious glances of their classmates. She stretched luxuriously and offered her brother a playful smile. "What's up? You look like you've got something on your mind, St. Harry." Ron managed to sputter. "Well, I thought I saw you, getting cozy with Lavender the other day." Ginny raised a single eyebrow. "Oh, funny, I only remember that being my business." She turned to Ron, who was desperately gulping down milk to hide his embarrassment. "By the way, wasn't that you, Ron, dining at the Gryffindor table last night?" "Just tonight," Ron shot back, cheeks flushing. Harry frowned and glanced over at the Gryffindor table, but neither Lavender Brown nor Parvati Patil was in sight. Harry strides into the common room just as Ron takes another furious bite of his bacon and egg sandwich. "We went to divination this morning," Ron growls between mouthfuls, "and all Professor Trelawney told us was that today is Saturday." Harry arches an eyebrow. "Divination? That's the same woman who made the prophecy about the Chosen One, isn't it? Do you think she's accurate?" Ginny's eyes sparkle with sudden interest. "What's she been predicting for Lavender and the others, anyway?" Ron snorts. "Beats me. I reckon it was Parvati who twisted Lavender's arm into going." Ginny frowns. All she said was, 'Today is Saturday.'" Ron waves a hand dismissively as he slathers ketchup on his sandwich. He chomps down on another sausage, clearly unsatisfied. "Honestly. But the weather's perfect," Ginny ventures. "I was looking forward to." "I was going to take her to Hagrid's to see Hephaestus," Ron interrupts, exasperated. Harry glances toward the window, frowning. "Where's the Daily Prophet? It should have arrived ages ago." Ron shrugs. "By now, the owls usually have it delivered." Harry cranes his neck, scanning the sky as if hoping to spot an owl. "I wonder if there's trouble at Azkaban again. Could explain the delay." Ginny steps closer and lays a hand on Harry's arm. "You're still worried about that?" she asks softly. Harry offers a small, strained smile. Ginny's fingers brush against his cheek, and she pauses. His skin feels different, smoother somehow, as if a hidden worry has lifted. She blinks, unsure what to make of it. The three of them stand in uneasy silence, the morning sunlight dancing across the enchanted ceiling. "Tomorrow will be Saturday," Professor Trelawney predicted, "but for now, they have their own uncertainties to confront." Ginny drifted closer to where Harry stood by the firelight, her fingers brushing the fabric of his robe. She paused, surprised to feel the gentle rise and fall of strong muscle beneath the cloth. Before she could let her hand rest, Ron's voice cut through the moment. "Hey, Ginny, save it for later, will you?" He swatted her hand away, grinning despite himself. Ginny pouted but shrugged. "It's February already. Hard to believe it's been almost a month." Harry folded his arms. "And still no word in the Daily Prophet about Azkaban." Hagrid, he reminded himself, said that was good news. Sirius, too, had insisted it wasn't something they needed to worry about. Yet Harry felt out of the loop, and it frustrated him more than ever. "We're not children anymore," he insisted. "We found Regulus Black, destroyed one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, and we even went to the moon. Why is this secret from us?" Ron C. lapped a hand on Harry's shoulder. "Maybe we should ask Lupin. He seemed to know something." "Really?" Harry glanced at Ginny, who gave him a quick, curious nod. "I ran into Remus at Hagrid's yesterday," Ron went on. "He looked so happy, happier than I've ever seen him, even more than when he saw Sirius again." Harry considered that. "And what about Draco? His father's still on Dumbledore's side, and Lucius Malfoy dotes on his boy almost as much as anyone." Ginny, Ron, and Harry exchanged determined looks. If the Order was keeping secrets, they intended to find out why, by asking their friends directly, if they had to. "He might know something," Ginny muttered as she surveyed the nearly deserted Slytherin table. "It's Saturday. Most of them are still asleep," Harry explained, glancing over at the empty seats. Draco and Pansy both took the day off. Ginny's eyes narrowed. Harry's earlier excitement faded as he shifted, momentarily forgetting that Ginny was perched on his lap. "What's going on with them?" You're hiding something from me, Ginny said, her voice low but firm. Harry froze. Across the table, Ron stabbed at his plate of pickled herring, an uncharacteristically enthusiastic attack on the smelly fish. They're engaged, Ron blurted out, herring and confusion alike in his mouth. Ginny's face went still. Engaged, she repeated, scarcely believing it. She and Harry had talked about marriage long ago, if only Voldemort hadn't intervened. And yet, Draco hadn't so much as mentioned an engagement party. Harry let out a slow breath. Pansy's family, some of them object to having a Weasley or a Potter involved in the celebration right now. And, he added gently, they lost their baby recently. The Parkinsons feel it's important to honor their own grieving period. Ginny stilled, her shock giving way to sympathy. She glanced at Harry, uncertainty and concern lingering in her eyes. For a moment, the Great Hall's empty benches felt heavy with unspoken questions, and the promise of changes none of them had seen coming. I still can't understand why anyone would follow Voldemort, Ginny muttered. Her friend raised an eyebrow. But by that logic, isn't Professor Riddle practically Voldemort in a different body? He may be younger, Ginny admitted, but he's every bit as ruthless, and perhaps even more cunning. There's Dumbledore behind him, her friend reminded her. Ginny shook her head. The news was troubling. The Parkinson relatives whose children had died in mysterious circumstances were clearly Voldemort's sympathizers. They weren't official Death Eaters, but their loyalty eclipsed even the Malfoys. Riddle's bias is painfully obvious, Ginny continued. Have you read what he wrote in his latest publication? I wouldn't be surprised, her friend whispered, if those young people who died were silenced by Riddle himself. I've done some digging, Ginny said. All of them held key positions at the Ministry, and they all shared anti-Muggle sentiments. Once they were gone, their entire department collapsed into chaos. Remember the scandal with Auror trainee Finny Dax? Her friend added. He broke up with his Muggle-born girlfriend just to curry favor with his superior. It was huge news at the time. Ginny sighed. As unsettling as it was, the pattern was clear. Riddle's influence reached far and wide, and Voldemort's shadow loomed larger than ever. Ron leaned in, his voice barely more than a whisper. The Daily Prophet just ran a report. He cast a quick glance over his shoulder, as if half expecting someone to be listening. He wasn't about to admit everything that was on his mind. He still suspected his father, and perhaps even Dumbledore, were behind it all. They weren't from this world, he reminded himself, but if their secret machinations meant protecting a clear, untainted realm and securing a brighter tomorrow, then he'd accept it. Before anyone could reply, Ginny pointed skyward. Here it comes. A slate-gray owl circled above, then swooped down in a graceful arc toward Harry, clutching a free, Schley-printed copy of the Prophet in its talons. Ginny shot Ron a wary look. She'd caught the dangerous edge in his tone. Whatever he was thinking, it was teetering on something far more serious than a simple news story. Chapter 420, Fanir's Incarnation. Harry stared at the newspaper in front of him, blinking in surprise. The masthead read The Quibbler, Luna Lovegood's eccentric family paper, bathed in bright purples and greens. Above the headline was a smaller banner proclaiming a joint report by the Daily Prophet and The Quibbler. Ron shuffled up behind him. What's caught your eye? He asked. Harry passed the paper across. The Quibbler, he said. It's Luna's dad's paper. It's been getting a lot of attention lately. Ginny joined them at the table and peered over Harry's shoulder. I remember when the Quibbler was the first to break the story on the bent-horned Snorlax, she said, tapping the page. They even scooped the Prophet on the Elder Wand's whereabouts. Maybe that's why Malfoy never got hold of it. Ron let out a low whistle. Xenophilius Lovegood really does have a knack for uncovering the strangest creatures, he said. After the bent-horned Snorlax, he found the scimitar-horned one. Pretty big news for anyone who's a werewolf, if I recall correctly. Harry flipped the page eagerly. Well, whatever he's discovered this time, it must be huge, he said. Come on, let's see what Fanir's Incarnation is all about. As winter drew to a close, he uncovered yet another astonishing spell hidden in the yellowed parchment. When he brought it to Dumbledore's attention, the headmaster's eyes gleamed with excitement. It's a rare enchantment, Dumbledore explained, one that not only cures lycanthropy at its source, but also grants the subject limited animagus abilities. Intrigued, the researcher pressed for details. Everyone knew how devastating lycanthropy could be. Under the full moon, a sufferer's human mind is overpowered, turning them into a wolf driven by instinct. Wounds inflicted in that beastly state never heal on their own, and anyone bitten under the moonlight risks catching the curse. Even ingesting certain white frost foods or silver-based powders can trigger the disease. This new spell, dubbed the Fenrir Avatar, eliminates the curse's infectious nature entirely. It doesn't just suppress the lycanthropic transformations, it fuses the patient's animal side with the magical disease itself, reconfiguring it into a controlled animagus-like power. The cured individual gains the ability to shift freely into a wolf at will, though no other animal forms are possible. To confirm the theory, Sengi Dune, head of the ministry's lycanthropy support service, oversaw a controlled trial. A volunteer, fully infected and currently in wolf form, received the Fenrir Avatar ritual. When the full moon rose again, he remained in his human body. Even more remarkable, any bite wounds he sustained from another lycanthrope healed completely, leaving no trace of the curse. With this discovery, the long nightmare of lycanthropy may finally be at an end, and those who once feared the next full moon can look forward to a life free of uncontrollable transformations. Without the wolfsbane potion, a werewolf under a full moon loses all reason and undergoes a wholly uncontrollable transformation. So why hasn't the magic to master the Fenrir aspect become widespread? Dumbledore addressed this directly. Its rarity stems from difficulty, not from any deliberate suppression. The true challenge is preserving one's sanity when the moon is at its peak. Beyond that, the remaining charms are no more arduous than the iron armor curse. Yet this explanation barely holds up. Those whose will is strong enough to stay human through the full moon need no extra magic, while the majority, unable to cling to their reason, could hardly hope to learn it. Fortunately, we need not rely solely on the ancients' methods. The wolfsbane potion, devised by Damocles Belby, Order of Merlin First Class, offers a far more practical path. Begin the regimen 1 week before the full moon, and even as the body shifts into its lupine form, the mind remains clear and fully intact. Harry, Ron, and Ginny were huddled around the latest issue of the Evening Prophet in the drawing room at Grim, Mauled Place. Harry tapped the headline with a grin. Listen to this. The Lycanthropy Patient Support Service has just announced that, thanks to advances in potion craft, anyone suffering from lycanthropy can now subscribe in advance to a steady supply of wolfsbane potion. No more scrambling for rare herb ingredients every month. Ginny raised an eyebrow. So that's why Remus has been smiling all week. Harry laughed. I was half convinced he'd finally fallen head over heels for Tonks, but it's just this good news. Ginny frowned at him. Who's Tonks? Ron shrugged, folding back the newspaper. Nymphadora Tonks, an Auror at the Ministry, Sirius's cousin. She's been after Lupin for ages, but he's always declined, saying his werewolf condition makes him unsuitable. Guess he's still not convinced. But if everyone with lycanthropy can prepay for wolfsbane, maybe Remus finally feels accepted. Harry suggested. Ron pointed to the photo above the article. A tall man with long silvery hair was standing beside Rita Skeeter, beaming and holding a placard that read, Good news for lycanthropes. See the wording? Now they're calling us lycanthropes instead of werewolves. It's a small change, but it carries a lot of weight. Ginny peered at the picture. Who's that? He looks familiar. That's Xenophilius Lovegood, Luna's dad, Ron said. Ginny's eyes went wide. Wait, so Luna's father is an advocate for magically afflicted folk? Why didn't you tell me? Harry smiled. Well, now you know. Between this and Trelawney's latest prophecy, it seems the wizarding world is finally learning to look after its own. We only found out by accident, you know. Lupin doesn't want anyone spreading it around. He said it hurt Tonks's reputation. Harry glanced nervously at Ron as he spoke. Ginny snorted, ignoring Ron's restless fidgeting. At that moment, she was utterly lost in thoughts of Professor Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks. Harry and Ron had barely given the details. No tale of their first meeting, no story of how they fell for each other. But in Ginny's mind, she'd already woven countless chapters of their romance. Tonks's parents shunning Lupin the moment they learned he was a werewolf, even Sirius turning his back on his old friend. She envisioned them at their lowest, only to be saved by a miraculous discovery that bound their hearts forever. Oi, Ginny, Earth to Ginny. Ron's voice cut through her daydream. Sorry, what? Ginny blinked, as though waking from a trance. She shook her head and forced a grin. I'm fine. Harry couldn't hide his grin. You see, they're in love. Ginny's cheeks warmed. Her pulse hammered in her ears. We have to find Lupin right now, she declared, as though launching a rescue mission. Ron sprang to his feet so suddenly that the table rattled. Wait. What? Harry and Ginny, still brimming with excitement, exchanged puzzled looks as Ron paced in a frenzy. What on earth was he up to now? Don't you see what this means? Ron's eyes were alight as he paced in tight circles around Harry. This is a gold mine. Harry frowned, trying to follow his friend's logic. But animagus magic is insanely difficult. Only 7 wizards have ever mastered it this century. Exactly. Ron stopped abruptly, beaming. Yet now, any werewolf willing to learn the Fenrir transformation can change shape just as an animagus does, without centuries of study. Harry's eyes widened. Right, since the Ministry fronted the money for the Wolfsbane potion, whoever teaches the Fenrir form stands to make a fortune. So? Ron asked eagerly. Harry's face lit up. Ron, you're brilliant. You're like a brother to me. Yeah? Ron said, chuckling nervously. Harry continued, his excitement growing. Think about it. Lycanthropes who master the Fenrir transformation lose their infectious bite. Over time, there'll be fewer and fewer uncontrolled werewolves running around. And the remaining wild werewolves, Ron added, the ones who haven't learned Fenrir, they'll be in hot demand by wizards desperate to become animagi. Harry nodded. Exactly. They'll become the new must-have students, a gold mine. And once word gets out, plenty of people will try to cash in. But we're in a different league, Ron said, steepling his fingers. We have Professor Lupin. Harry's grin grew wider. Right, you and Lupin can find more willing werewolves than anyone else. Ron's eyes sparkled with dollar signs. We'll corner the market. You're out of your mind, Ginny exclaimed, crossing her arms. Ron just shrugged. Ever hear of the smoke bottles? I've already pulled in a fortune. You can never have too many galleons. Ginny's eyes narrowed. This isn't just about padding your vault, is it? It's for Lupin, Ron said, sounding more triumphant by the second. Ginny shook her head. So now you're padding his bank account too? Seriously, Ron, Remus has finally gotten past the whole werewolf stigma, but he's still got 2 feet and a wallet that's nearly empty. Exactly, Ron replied, leaning forward. They need money to get married. Ginny folded her arms tighter. And just where is Tonks's family in all this? Her mum walked away from the Blacks with a small fortune. Surely she could help. Maybe, Ron admitted, but I want to do this. I'm helping Remus. He grinned, chest swelling with pride. After all he's been through, he deserves it. Chapter 41, Bat God Ebony Rodus. Harry leveled a steely look at Ron. Swear to Merlin you really did it for Lupin. No funny business. Ron blinked, expression utterly blank. Beside him, Ginny leaned against Harry's shoulder and echoed his skepticism. Tut-tut, Ron. If it's just profit you're after. They had strolled down to the lake's edge and settled beneath a broad beech tree. The sunlight danced on the glassy water, and not far off a group of girls who'd just left the hall laughed as they kicked off their shoes and wiggled their toes in the cool shallows. Oi! Ron Weasley, Ginny called, waving impatiently at her brother. He barely stirred, lost in the tranquil expanse of the lake. When he still didn't respond, Ginny threw her hands on her hips, her tone taking on an unmistakable Mrs. Weasley cadence that set Harry's nerves tingling with déjà vu. Trying to hide his amusement, Harry gave Ron a gentle shove. Earth to Ron. Ron lurched forward to steady himself. Hey, what was that for? Ginny shot him a withering look. You've forgotten you're not a free agent anymore. Come on, Ron, snap out of it. Harry stifled a laugh. Left to right, they were like 2 halves of the same scolding mother, and he was right in the middle, lucky him. Harry jolted upright, blinking as if waking from a dream. Ron, staring off toward the black lake, immediately caught on to his friend's dazed expression. Sorry, Ron said, running a hand through his hair. I promised Lupin I wouldn't bring this up again. But something just occurred to me, he added, glancing at Ginny and Harry. Harry shifted against the trunk of the large beech tree, his gaze fixed on the lake's dark surface. What is it? Ginny prompted. We need to find Lupin, Ron said, his voice low but urgent. Ginny nodded. He's the only one who could have mastered Fenrir's. She broke off, but Harry cut in swiftly. Right, and what about Remus and Tonks, and the secrets he might know about Azkaban's inner workings? Ron's eyes brightened. Exactly. If anyone can tell us how the prison's wards operate, it's him. Harry frowned, looking from Ron to Ginny. But where is he now? He's probably not even at Hogwarts. Ginny reached into her robes and drew her wand, a confident smile playing on her lips. Actually, I have a plan. Harry and Ron exchanged puzzled looks. Remember the Zara tribe in Africa? Ginny began. Their totem is the bat, and they worship the bat god Umulatus. According to their legends, Umulatus fashioned humanity from his own hair, and then transformed some of that hair into bats to nourish the new race. Harry raised his eyebrows but leaned in. In Zara magic, Ginny continued, a strand of hair consecrated to Umulatus can pierce any barrier and track a person wherever they hide. With the right ritual, we could extend a summons to Lupin, breaking through any enchantment he's under. Ron let out a relieved breath. That's brilliant. Do you think it will work? Ginny tucked her wand away. It's worth a shot. We just need something of Lupin's, hair, perhaps, and a quiet spot by the lake. Harry allowed himself a hopeful grin. Then let's not waste any time. Together, the three friends set off toward the shallows of the Black Lake, determined to call for Remus Lupin and learn the secrets he held. Yes, food. In the Muggle world, it's known as the hammer-headed fruit bat, the largest bat in Africa. Its face combines the grace of a fox with the strength of a horse, a smooth chin framed by stiff whiskers on either side of its muzzle. It lives on fruit pulp, primarily figs, though it will also feast on mangoes, bananas, and guavas. With a single catch, a hunter need not look for dinner again that night. To the wizards of the Zara tribe, this bat embodies the bat god's power of harvest. They believe Umulatos, their deity, bestows countless divine gifts, and the one Ginny was calling upon now was the most mysterious of all, spirit summoning. According to Zara legend, Umulatos can draw a person's soul back from the beyond simply by uttering their true nen, am. The tribe holds that the most outstanding among them, those cut down before their time, are granted early passage into Umulatos' realm, where they join an endless host of hammer-headed fruit bats. Remus Lupin, Ginny cried, tracing a perfect circle in the air with her wand. Her fingertip flashed with green light as she drove the spell forward, calling him home. A massive, strange bat appeared before Ginny, its fur a deep brown, its face oddly horse-like. It hovered in midair for a heartbeat, then spread its enormous wings and soared into the sky. "What on earth is that thing?" Ron exclaimed, stumbling backward. Ginny didn't hesitate. "It's a variation of the bat spell. I followed the instructions from the bat book." Harry's face blanched, but he kept his voice steady. "Do we need to follow it?" Ginny shut her eyes and gripped Harry's arm. Her lids trembled as she concentrated. "No," she said quietly. "The bat will respond to me once it finds Lupin. I just need to track it." Instantly, Ginny's mind filled with images. The bat weaving through the trees, skimming low over brambles, heading straight for the Forbidden Forest. Along with the flight path came precise coordinates, the exact spot where Lupin stood. Harry wrapped his arms around her. "Are you all right? Or should we just send an owl instead?" Ginny opened her eyes, calm and certain. "An owl would be too slow. The bat will reach him far quicker." Ron glanced between her and Harry, uncertainty in his eyes. But Ginny was already refocusing, channeling her magic to guide her unusual messenger on its urgent mission. Ginny's voice trembled as she relayed what she'd witnessed. "I saw Professor Lupin in the Forbidden Forest. He was down in a deep, dark pit, surrounded by a pack of ragged werewolves. They were talking about Fenrir's incarnation, and Lupin said that Snape might be able to supply Wolfsbane potion for free." Ron's eyes lit up. "Then that's where we should go. Hagrid's hut. We'll wait there and catch up to Lupin." Ginny bit her lip. "But does Hagrid really know what's going on in the forest?" "Oh, he does," Ron insisted, waving a hand. "Last time I asked him, he admitted he has a way of hearing the centaurs deep in the woods, even from his cabin." Harry leaned forward, excitement and concern mingling on his face. "If Hagrid can listen in, we can send messages to Lupin through him. It's our best shot." Deep beneath the forest floor, in a cavern so pitch black it seemed to swallow every spark of light, Professor Remus Lupin raised his wand. With a firm flick, a circle of tinder burst into blue flame, revealing a huddle of werewolves. Their fur was matted, their ragged skins fashioned into crude garments of hide and woven grasses. They stood motionless, eyes fixed on Lupin. The fire crackled, and from its heart a pale human face formed, features wreathed in smoke and flickering embers. The voice that emerged was low and urgent. "I searched for the bat. It's gone." Lupin met the apparition's gaze without flinching. The face drifted closer, eyes burning brighter. "Remus," it demanded, "can you describe this bat to me?" "So it left the Forbidden Forest in mere minutes," Lupin reported. He didn't answer the next question right away. Instead, he thought back to exactly what Hagrid must have seen. Dumbledore had hidden ordinary stones, rare herbs, and other markers all through the forest, yet Hagrid found them instantly. Someone spoke up. "What did it look like?" Hagrid frowned. "I've never seen a bat that big before. Its wingspan was nearly 2 feet. Honestly, if I hadn't developed such sharp vision since learning magic, I'd have thought my eyes were playing tricks on me." Lupin shook his head. Could it be Voldemort? Hagrid waved the idea away. "No, its fur was jet black, but it's not you-know-who." "Even Voldemort wouldn't attack fully alert wizards," Lupin added. "Hold on, Harry and the others are here." "I meant to," Hagrid began. Before he could finish, the face flickering in the flue flame vanished. Next chapter coming soon. Then, chaos for your monthly tickets, recommendations, and subscriptions. Chapter 422, Ron is Possessed. Harry had barely caught his breath when Hagrid came barreling into the hut, eyes wide with excitement. "Professor Lupin," Hagrid bellowed, "you won't believe what we just saw in the forest." Lupin, who'd been sipping tea in front of the fire, set down his cup. "What now, Hagrid?" "It was Ginny," Hagrid exclaimed. She conjured a bat the size of a cat, and it chased off those werewolves like they were terrified puppies." Lupin leapt to his feet so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Wait, did I hear you right? That was your magic?" Ginny, pale but triumphant, ducked behind Harry and stuck out her tongue. "Surprise," she said softly. Harry frowned. "A bat that big? And it intimidated werewolves in the heart of the Forbidden Forest?" Ginny nodded. "I think it worked because they thought the bat was in trouble. They herded it straight into their den, and that kept them away from us." Lupin ran a hand through his hair. "Remarkable. And you managed this with no prior training?" "Well," Ginny glanced at Harry and Ron. "Let's just say I've been practicing." "Practicing?" Lupin repeated, and then his eyes went wide. "With the Ravenclaw diadem?" Harry's hand tightened around the ancient crown he'd kept hidden since Christmas. "Yes," he admitted. Lupin strode toward them, voice low. "That explains it. I suspected when Ron's mist flask surprised me the other day that something was at work beyond simple improvised spell work. The diadem's influence is growing, amplifying creativity, ingenuity, and apparently turning those ideas into reality." Ron, who'd been slumped against the doorframe, blinked in confusion. "Wait, my mist bottle was from the diadem?" Before anyone could answer, Harry gave Ron an elbow in the ribs. "Ow!" Ron yelped. Then he shot Harry a mock glare. "Thanks a lot, mate." Ginny grinned. "You're welcome." Lupin turned back to Hagrid. "All right, Hagrid. Go and keep an eye on the forest. If those werewolves get curious again, I'll be here to help. Ginny, Harry, let's discuss how you're handling that diadem. I'm concerned about what's next." Ginny and Harry exchanged a worried glance, while Ron rubbed his side and muttered, "Possessed indeed." But deep inside, all of them wondered, what other extraordinary magic would emerge as the Ravenclaw diadem worked its subtle power on their imaginations? Harry closed his book with a soft snap. "Yes, but the diadem isn't universally effective." Ron frowned, spinning his wand between his fingers. "We've lent it to half the Ravenclaws in our year 2, yet only you and Ginny ever saw any change." Harry grinned, running a hand through his hair. "That's because I tweaked the enchantment using some of the techniques I picked up in Moon City." For a moment, Ron just stared at him, then broke into a slow nod of approval. Ginny, peering over Harry's shoulder, gave a quick, conspiratorial wink. At that moment, a gentle chuckle echoed down the corridor. Remus Lupin appeared in the doorway, his patched coat collar turned up against the chill. "Hagrid mentioned the 3 of you wanted to see me." They slipped into an empty classroom, and Lupin closed the door behind them. As he leaned against a desk, he looked from Harry to Ron to Ginny, all eager anticipation. Ginny spoke first, her tone practically bursting with curiosity. "How are you and Tonks doing?" Ron jumped in at once. And what about Fenrir Greyback? Is shifting back from wolf form harder for him than transforming does for an animagus? Harry cleared his throat. Oh, and what's the situation in Azkaban these days? Lupin's eyebrows shot skyward. You actually came all this way just to ask those questions? He gave Ginny a fond, half-amused look. I'm surprised you even know about Tonks and me. He sighed gently, then shook his head with a small, rueful smile. Right, children. I appreciate your concern, but what happens between Tonks and me is, well, it's our private matter. Lupin ran a hand through his hair and sighed. Honestly, things between us are moving in the right direction, though convincing her feels like pulling teeth. He shot Ginny a helpless look. Her expression was so exasperated it nearly garnered a sympathetic laugh. Enough of that, Ginny snapped, springing to her feet. We need to talk about Azkaban. Dumbledore and the Ministry have had eyes on the entire North Sea. They've been monitoring every ship, every island, every hidden cove. Lupin nodded. You should understand why. Dumbledore is a master alchemist, almost on the level of Nick Flamel. Over the years, he's crafted countless arcane instruments, scattered them throughout these waters to keep them safe, to keep them hidden from the wrong hands. Hold on, Harry interrupted, his voice low but firm. You're saying too much. He locked eyes with Lupin. I know there's a connection between Voldemort and me. I've feared all along that he could pry into my mind. Dumbledore knows it too. Ginny's anger faltered. So you've been keeping this from us? Harry shook his head. I assumed you'd already been told. I didn't think it would come out like this. Lupin laid a hand on Harry's shoulder, half in reassurance, half in exasperation, and froze, momentarily startled by how much the years had changed him. Dumbledore knew, yes, he said quietly. But maybe it's better Voldemort hears it directly from you. If we're going to face him, we need every tool at our disposal, even that terrible bond of yours. Ginny and Harry exchanged uneasy glances as the reality of Lupin's words settled over them. The future was uncertain, but at least now they all understood the stakes. Don't look at me, Ron. They're true, Lupin said with a calm smile. But there's no need to hide anything, he went on, and you can stop worrying about Voldemort slipping into your mind. Harry raised an eyebrow. How can you be so sure? Lupin gave Harry's shoulder a reassuring pat. Dumbledore explained that, in your current state, Voldemort trying to invade your thoughts would be like someone diving into a furnace without any protection. Ginny, who'd been on the verge of tears, threw her arms around Harry. Lupin stepped back awkwardly, offering a wavering grin. Maybe still a bit dramatic, but you get the idea. Harry managed a small laugh, though concern lingered in his eyes. I'm still a little worried, he admitted. He thought of Ryan's advice. Harry had begged him to teach a mental blocking charm to keep Voldemort out, but Ryan had insisted it would stifle the strange magic growing in Harry's heart, and might even hold back its evolution. Ron's brow furrowed. Hold on. Why am I the last to find out about all this? Ginny and I should have heard first. Hagrid, standing nearby, gave Ron a knowing wink. I told Lupin every word Harry whispered to me. Behind Hagrid, Hephaestus raised a hand in greeting, as if to say, guilty as charged. How is that possible? Ron demanded. You obviously. He broke off mid-sentence as realization dawned. On their journey to the moon, Ryan's enchantment had allowed him to speak without moving his lips. Harry clearly had the same gift. And now he saw that Hagrid did too. A glance at Harry, casually whistling, confirmed it. You never told me, Ron accused. Harry shrugged. I only just figured it out. Hagrid ran a great, calloused hand through his tangled hair and sighed. I planned to speak with Harry in private, but the moment I opened my mouth, my words rang inside his head. He sounded genuinely surprised. Since merging with the Forbidden Forest and awakening the Dragon Lord's magic within Harry, the half-giant had unlocked new powers, and with them, the peculiar gifts of magical creatures. His giant heritage had grown only stronger. He fancied he could now wrestle a dragon into submission with his bare hands. Ron narrowed his eyes. So then what does alone even mean anymore? Hagrid glanced up from the edge of his chair, his massive shoulders hunched in exasperation. Ron, you've been turning up at my hut every single day lately. Ron shifted his weight, looking sheepish. Well, I've have had to, get to know you better. Hagrid's brows knit together. And each time I ran into you, you did most of the talking, asking after Lupin, all that. I'm starting to worry you'll blurt something out that offends him." He gave a resigned shrug. To Hagrid's eye, Ron was a good kid, but his wiring was different. Recently, after Ron struck it rich with his new smoke bottle invention, his thoughts had been consumed by one thing: making more money. That obsession is what brought Ron here again today. He wanted Hagrid to help him advertise a remarkable talent, Ron's knack for turning inanimate objects into living creatures, and then sell that service to the richest wizards in Britain. "Think about it," Ron had pitched enthusiastically. "Once you've got gold and power, the next big worry is inheritance. You can leave galleons to your kids, but those can be stolen. You can leave them house elves, but elves age and die. But mark my words, Hagrid, an alchemical creature with your blessing would live on. It'd be the ultimate guarantee for a wizarding bloodline." Hagrid stared at him in stunned silence. Outside, the wind rattled the windows of the little hut, as if echoing his turmoil. Deep down, Hagrid understood why wizards prized legacy above all else, but the thought of packaging his creatures as inheritance insurance made him uneasy. Still, he forced a polite nod. "I'll think about it, Ron," he said quietly. "I just need some time." Ron gave a half-hearted shrug. "Offend people?" Harry and Ginny exchanged glances. "I'm only doing this for Lupin's own good," Ron said defensively. Then he turned back to them. "Seriously, tell me, does the plan I suggested earlier really help him?" He rubbed the back of his head, looking sheepish. "Think about it. We'd be killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Lupin gets the money he needs, his werewolf friend boosts his reputation among the wizarding community, and, well, I come out with a nice little reward myself." Chapter 423. Argus Filch and Roll Remus Lupin had known for some time that Ron was prone to questionable ideas, but he'd never expected him to go quite this far. Listening to Ron, you'd think he was pitching a scheme to African Americans in the Deep South. "Look, folks, your ancestors were expert watermelon farmers. Why not pick up where they left off? I'll handle the marketing. And the land? The U.S. government will waive all fees and pre-assign the plots for you. As for labor, well, you're black, so you've already got the experience. I'll just take care of the sales." In Lupin's mind, the comparison was absurdly clear. Black Americans stood in for werewolves, the Ministry of Magic for the U.S. government, and the waived fees mirrored the prepayment terms of the Wolfsbane Potion Act. Essentially, Ron was proposing to make a fortune out of thin air. And knowing Ron, he'd almost certainly farm out the actual selling to Percy, too. Lupin shook his head. If this ever ran in the Daily Prophet, well, Sirius would have a field day exposing the whole thing. Remus paused, steepling his fingers. "If we follow your plan to the letter, we could launch this entire venture perfectly well without you." Ron shot him an incredulous look. "But I'm the one who came up with the idea in the first place. And to make sure we don't endanger any innocent werewolves," Ron cut in eagerly, "I'll ask my father to issue a royal decree authorizing the regulated sale of lycanthropic bodily fluids. With that law on the books, I'll take a position in the new enforcement department as its legal overseer, ensuring no outside investors can muscle in." Remus raised an eyebrow. "So the werewolves will be compelled to sign up with us if they ever want to practice Finnear's transformation?" "Exactly," Ron said, nodding. "By joining our program, they'll earn a reliable income, and we'll control the whole operation. If anyone dares to smear our reputation, the Daily Prophet will publish the real facts of our work." He straightened, eyes alight. "With my father's authority, my oversight, and the Prophet's backing, we'll build a thriving, responsible industry, one that benefits everyone involved and harms no one." Ron's enthusiasm peaked as he pumped his fists. Then he added, a mischievous grin tugging at his lips, "Naturally, the profits will be shared among me, you, Fred and George, my father, and the Daily Prophet." Draco stood in the center of the room, composed and self-assured, while Ginny, Hagrid, Harry, Ron, and Lupin stared at him in stunned silence. "Wait a minute," Ron finally blurted. "You really are Draco Malfoy." "By Merlin's beard," blurted Hagrid. "What sort of trick is this? Monopoly?" Ginny exchanged a glance with Harry and Lupin. "Could we have the wrong Draco Malfoy?" she asked. "Why would you even say something like that?" Draco's lips curved in a faint smile. "Doesn't my performance so far prove I'm a Ravenclaw through and through?" Harry shook his head in admiration. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Ron rapped Draco gently on the forehead with his knuckles. You're smart, kid, but you're still hiding something, your true identity. We know your family ties. Arthur Weasley and I have worked side by side in the Order, and Sirius is like a brother to me. Draco's expression remained cool and unflinching. Precisely why I've kept my cards close. I can carry out your proposal, infect someone with lycanthropy, have them master the Fenrir transformation spell, and I'll fund every last galleon. Ginny's eyes went wide. You'd bankroll what amounts to werewolf research? Think of it as a controlled program, Draco said evenly. Mutations under supervision, magic teaching, a chain of command. Remus Lupin's face darkened. He stepped forward, voice low but firm. And what about the Muggle-born werewolves? Those bitten by non-magical wolves can't learn the Fenrir transformation. If you turn this into an industry, they'll be exploited far worse than any dragon in a dragon farm. The room fell silent at Lupin's warn. Draco's jaw tightened, but he offered no rebuttal. At last, Ron exhaled, shoulders slumping. All right, we'll go with your plan. On one condition, everyone's safety comes first. Draco inclined his head once, and the uneasy alliance was sealed. Harry's voice cut through the uneasy silence. So Fenrir Greyback's transformation really is that powerful? Lupin pressed his lips together. A cautious man by nature, he never speculated with maybe or might. Yet here he was, forced to admit that some witches and wizards were willing to risk lycanthropy just to test the limits of Greyback's curse. First, he said, do you know the difference between a squib and a muggle? Ron waved a hand. They're both non-magical, right? Squibs are born to wizarding families, muggles to non-magical ones. Lupin shook his head. No, squibs might lack the ability to cast spells, but they're the direct descendants of witches and wizards. They can perceive magical beings, dementors, for instance, when muggles can't. Their bloodline still hums with magic, however faintly. Harry frowned. But what does that have to do with werewolves? Remus's expression turned grim. Among the werewolves the Ministry recently rounded up, the only ones who haven't shown Greyback-level transformations are those infected by muggles, by squibs, or by a deliberate wizard's curse. Every other werewolf they examined, regardless of how they caught the disease, has demonstrated the full feral shift that Greyback is infamous for. Harry felt a chill. Fenrir Greyback's curse wasn't just a personal horror. It was spreading further and faster than anyone had realized. The wizarding world might not be prepared for what came next. But Dumbledore said that mastering the Fenrir transformation is only as difficult as the ironclad charm, Ginny pressed, her brow furrowed. Surely a squib could learn even a simple spell like luminescent? Remus Lupin gave a tired sigh. That's only part of the story. On the night of a full moon, a squib-turned werewolf who's taken wolfsbane potion is no different from a wizard werewolf in terms of raw power and danger. But learning the transformation is another matter entirely. He leaned forward, his expression serious. For a squib werewolf, acquiring the Fenrir transformation is as challenging as it is for a wizard to master the ironclad charm. Yet once they overcome that hurdle, they can function almost like any other witch or wizard. They just need to learn the basics afterward. Ginny's eyes widened. So, think about what this implies, Lupin interrupted gently. If a child is born a squib, that's usually the end of their magical prospects. But if that squib contracts lycanthropy, they suddenly gain the potential to become a fully functional magical practitioner. He shook his head, a shadow crossing his face. This is why I cautioned you, Ron, to steer clear of these matters. There are powerful people who covet this loophole. They believe that by spreading lycanthropy among squibs, they can ensure magic stays in pure wizarding bloodlines, or conversely, force magic into lines otherwise denied it. Lupin's voice dropped to a whisper. It's a dangerous ambition, and one the Ministry isn't prepared to police. A heavy silence settled over the room as the students absorbed the implications. Beyond simple transformations or latent talents, they now faced a truth that cut to the heart of wizarding society's deepest, most divisive prejudices, and to the length some would go to preserve or reshape their world. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Rubeus Hagrid, and Professor Lupin clustered just outside Argus Filch's office. The corridor was unusually still, except for the faint sound of Mrs. Norris padding inside. I can't figure out why Filch has been so cheerful lately, Harry muttered. Ron shrugged. He even let Mrs. Norris have a playdate with Fang. Hagrid's eyes suddenly sparked. He said something about having another surname. Roll, I think. The caretaker's surname is Filch, Ron pointed out, scratching his head. Argus Filch. Roll? Isn't that one of the old pure-blood families, the Holy 28? Harry's face lit up. Exactly. Damocles Roll was the Minister of Magic who turned Azkaban into a prison for wizards, and his descendants have kept that policy ever since. When Eldritch Diggory, Cedric's ancestor, had to repeal it, a Roll cursed him. Eldritch died of dragonpox shortly after. The Rolls clearly have very strong opinions about Azkaban. Hagrid nodded. Filch now says we should call him Argus Filch Roll. Ron let out a frustrated snort. No wonder he's so eager to bring back corporal punishment around here. So he really is a Roll, Ron said, narrowing his eyes. He glanced at Lupin. Remus, do you think Filch might know some secret history of Azkaban that we've never heard? Harry leaned forward, excitement in his voice. It's strange, isn't it? A Roll insisting Azkaban remains strictly a wizarding prison. There has to be more to this. I'd be happy to help polish and restructure the chapter. Could you please share the full text of the chapter you'd like me to revise? Once I have the complete passage, I can rewrite it into clear, idiomatic English while preserving all the plot details and character nuances. Chapter 424, Lupin's Changes. It's really rather peculiar, Remus Lupin murmured as he and Hagrid walked back toward the castle. Hagrid nodded. Aye, but what astonished me most was when Roll offered to take in a squib. Lupin frowned. Even that squib has contracted lycanthropy and already mastered some basic magic. It must be related to the recent alterations at Azkaban. Tell Professor Dumbledore your theory, Lupin urged. Without a word, Hagrid closed his eyes and transmitted the message to Dumbledore in the same silent manner he'd used moments ago with Harry. Around them, students and teachers watched in tense silence as the minutes slipped by. Finally, Hagrid opened his eyes and turned back to Lupin. Professor Dumbledore says he's known about this for quite some time. He agrees. It's unfolding in a promising direction. What? Ron muttered, clearly put out. But Harry flashed him a sharp glance and waved for Ginny to hurry along. Let's go, Harry said softly, tugging Ginny's hand toward the castle doors. Ginny called back over her shoulder. Lupin, you have to get along with Tonks. Lupin watched them go, then sighed to himself. There's still a year. Dumbledore did say there's still a year. He repeated the words to reassure himself, even as the castle door swung shut behind Harry and the others. Hagrid's black, beetle-like eyes went wide. Aren't you going to ask her, Tonks? He thundered, grinning from ear to ear. Remus Lupin let out a long, rueful sigh. Before Hagrid could launch into another round of teasing, Harry slipped a finger to his lips and quietly ushered Ron and Ginny away from the hut. They walked on in near silence, the towers of Hogwarts growing larger against the dusky sky. After several minutes, Ron could hold back no longer. Harry, what was that all about? Why did we sneak out of Hagrid's cabin so fast? Ginny shot her brother an admonishing look. If Harry was keeping something to himself, she wanted in on it. But Harry stayed silent, eyes fixed on the winding path ahead. Come on, Ron pressed. Now that we're alone, you can tell us. Harry finally stopped and faced them. In a low voice, he said, I was worried Hagrid might overhear us. Overhear what? Ginny asked. You know, Harry answered, from what Hagrid and Remus were saying about Azkaban. The Ministry's desperate effort to keep its true state under wraps has to be connected to the strange changes happening there. Ron's brow furrowed. And on top of that, Dad builds a new prison for minor offenders, and no one in the department even blinks. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Harry nodded. Exactly. It can't be a coincidence. He hesitated, wary of speaking too loudly. If Hagrid really had been listening, his booming voice would have carried every secret right back to the hut. Harry risked a look over his shoulder. Through the thinning trees, he could see only the quiet edge of the forest, no sign that Hagrid or Lupin had followed them. Looks like we're safe, he whispered, relief flooding him. Let's head back inside. Harry paused in the dim corridor, running a hand through his hair. So, you knew about this all along? Ron perched on a dusty crate, looking both exasperated and confused. Don't kid yourself, I'm no Dumbledore. Harry shot him a wry look. But Dumbledore is the one with access to every whispered secret in the Ministry. He's inside information. We've only got Argus Filch. Ron snorted. He's a squib. In a pure-blood family like the Rolmars, Harry said grimly, what could a mere squib possibly know? And yet here they are, letting Filch handle their most closely guarded secret. He paused. The disappearance of Azkaban must have shaken them to their core. They've clearly decided the risk is too great to entrust it to anyone but their downtrodden caretaker. Ron shook his head. Even so, if Filch holds the key, we have to get it from him. Harry folded his arms. We have two options. First, find Stephen, the fourth-year Ravenclaw who adores cats. Filch talks to him. The caretaker trusts that boy. Stephen's our best shot at prying information out of Filch. Second, we go through Draco. You know how pure-blood politics work. The Black, Malfoy, and Rolmar families are all tangled up together. If anyone can open doors for us, it's Malfoy. Ron nodded reluctantly. Neither path sounds clean, but you're right. It's our only choice. Harry took a deep breath. Then let's decide which door to knock on first. It's probably simpler than we thought to cajole him into visiting the Roar family and digging up that little piece of gossip, Harry said, growing more animated by the second. His hands flew through the air as he explained. Ron narrowed his eyes. When did you come up with this? He asked, suddenly feeling as though Harry's mind were a closed book he'd never really understood. Just now, Harry admitted with a grin. The idea hit me the moment you mentioned Filch. But, Harry held up a finger, cutting Ron off. He turned to Ginny, then back to Ron. I actually think your plan is already half in motion. Ron frowned. What makes you say that? Have you noticed how Remus Lupin looks these days? Harry asked quietly. The last time they'd seen Lupin, he'd appeared utterly drained, pale, thin, with cheeks hollowed by exhaustion. But when he returned to Hogwarts only a few nights ago, there was a new tension in his posture, a restlessness in his gaze. Harry exchanged a look with Ginny. Ron sat unmoving, brow furrowed, as he pieced the puzzle together. He arrived far sooner than we expected, Ron said at last. And that's when I realized, Harry said, voice dropping to a whisper, he must already know about the Roar family. I thought of this plan the moment you mentioned Filch, but it seems someone beat me to the punch. Ginny leaned forward, eyes bright with excitement. Then let's speak with him directly and see exactly what he's learned. Ron cracked a grin. Well, that certainly makes things more interesting. Harry and Ginny stood a few paces from Hagrid's hut, watching Professor Lupin stride toward them. He covered miles of forest ground in under 10 minutes, Harry observed. And he doesn't look exhausted, no heavy breathing, no stumbling. Ginny frowned. I thought he might have used some obscure transportation charm. Harry shook his head, a small smile curving his lips. Look closer. His leather boots are still crusted with mud. No one's had time to brush it off. And his hair is mussed, like it's been whipped by a strong wind. Ginny bent to examine the boot prints in the soft earth. Walking through the forbidden forest always leaves you muddy, but see how the mud on his soles is drying out? That happens when you run hard. Heat and friction evaporate the moisture. And it's a calm day, no breeze to tousle his hair. If he'd shifted into a wolf and sprinted over, his fur would be sleek and wet, not dusty and windswept. So he definitely came on 2 feet, Harry concluded. Ginny stood, her expression thoughtful. That's one thing, but there's something else. Look at him. She tilted her head. Lupin's body hair is noticeably thicker than it was last week. Almost bristly. Harry followed her gaze to where Lupin paused on the path. The professor's posture was stiff, as if he were trying to keep himself in check. And though his clothes hung the same, a faint ripple of extra hair showed at his collar and sleeves. We'll have to talk to him, Harry said quietly. There's more going on here than a simple rescue. When his hand settled on my shoulder, I caught sight of his chest, and it was completely smooth. There wasn't a wisp of the thick, coarse hair he'd always lacked before. His hollow cheeks had filled out with healthy color, and the gaunt hollows of hunger were gone from his face. His whole frame seemed sturdier, too, no longer the lean, undernourished shape I remembered. As our bodies brushed, I even glimpsed the faint outline of muscles rippling beneath his shirt. For an instant, I wondered if he'd been practicing the same body transformation magic from the method of forging a strong heart that I had. Then I reminded myself that Feniel's incarnation wasn't ordinary magic. Once you learned it, your human form carried over some of your wolf form strength and physique. Harry narrowed his eyes, piecing it all together. This wasn't the result of simple spells. It was proof that Feniel's power ran deeper than anyone had guessed. Then in the future, wizards will split into two camps, Ron said, leaning forward. Those who have mastered Fenrir's avatar, and those who haven't. Harry nodded. Exactly. Without that mastery, you'd suffer too much. Imagine combining a werewolf's naturally formidable physique with wizarding magic. It would be unstoppable. No wonder the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures at the Ministry of Magic is eager to bankroll the Wolfsbane potion, Ron went on. It's by far the most cost-effective program in the entire ministry. Most werewolves can't afford the cure on their own. Harry tapped his chin. By funding it up front, the department effectively creates a squad of powerful wizards who've learned Fenrir's avatar. In return, those wizards incur a debt they must repay by following the ministry's orders, at least until the potion's cost is covered. Ron's eyes widened as it finally clicked. So that's why you said your plan was already half in place. This isn't just about families wanting magical heirs. It's backed by the ministry's own strategy. It's bigger than anything we could have dreamed up on our own. Chapter 425, in the Administrator's Office. As the sky outside deepened from pale blue to dusky purple, the last rays of sunlight slipped beyond the horizon. The enchanted ceiling of the Administrator's office dimmed, its stars flickering as if reluctant to surrender to the coming night. Then, on a single glowing thread, a pure white paper crane materialized above the desk. Its origami wings trembled with life as it traced an elegant arc through the air, alighting gently in Harry's outstretched hands. Harry cradled the delicate bird, eyes shining with expectancy. What did Draco say? Ron, who had been perched across the table, sprang to his feet and wound around to Harry's right side. He's going to press for answers at tonight's dinner, when all the pureblood families are gathered under one roof. He thinks someone there must know something. Harry slipped an arm around Ginny's waist as she leaned in beside him, then carefully unfolded the tiny parchment hidden in the crane's wings. He leveled a wry look at Ron. That's it? Ron's brow furrowed. Any sign of Catman, Stephen? Harry shook his head. Still missing. And you? Ron jabbed Harry's ribs playfully. Yesterday you did nothing but spend the entire afternoon with Lavender. Harry rolled his eyes. Believe it or not, I was multitasking. Ron shifted in his seat, cheeks reddening. Lavender and I are officially together now, he blurted, forcing a nervy half-smile. I just thought you two should know. Despite the fact that he and Lavender talked non-stop, their relationship had, so far, barely progressed beyond tentative hand-holding. Professor Trelawney leaned forward in her velvet armchair, spectacles sliding down her nose. Lavender, darling, if you wish to avoid repeating old mistakes, you must learn to speak openly with Ron, beyond those nightly kisses, of course. And remember, in the early stages, a sweet handhold is more than sufficient. Never let him slip away. Ginny rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. Am I the only one who's noticed that Ron's been trying to hug you for weeks, and every time, you disappear like a ghost? She shook her head, half amused, half exasperated. You two could use a lot more practice. Draco Malfoy looked up from his desk, quill in hand. By the way, I'll be back from my family's estate next Thursday evening, he said crisply. If any of you need me, that's when I'll return. Ron's face lit up. Perfect. Maybe we can all get together on Friday? He opened his mouth to say more, but before he could finish, Harry's fingertips flared with vivid blue flame, incinerating Draco's parchment to ash. Ron stared at the smoldering remains in disbelief. Harry waved a hand nonchalantly. Relax, it's nothing serious. Draco said he'll be back Monday morning, Ron reported, sinking into the worn armchair by the hearth. And the engagement banquet, it's going to run for 2 full days. Harry frowned. 2 days? Why so long? Turns out he spotted plenty of familiar Slytherins at the dinner, Ron explained, but there were also a handful of complete strangers, young, old, the lot of them, people who really don't belong in their circle. They all smelled like muggles, and from the look of them, you'd never guess they came from wizarding stock. Harry's eyes narrowed. That must be the same branches of the family Roel cut off for having squibs. He's invited them all back. Exactly, Ron said, waving a hand. No wonder pure-blood wizards from the other houses are conspicuously absent this year. There simply aren't many left. Instead, Draco's turned his engagement celebration into a 2-day reunion for pure-blood families to reconnect with the relatives who drifted into Muggle society. So that explains the length, Harry mused. And with every pure-blood family under one enchanted roof, Draco's bound to dig up Rawls' secret before the banquet ends, assuming that secret still matters. Harry scoffed. Harry couldn't stop mulling over one thing. The engagement party he and Ginny were supposed to have over Christmas. He felt uneasy, not because he didn't want to marry her, but because everything was moving so quickly. They'd only been together a short time. Surely they should be engaged for at least a year before throwing a celebration. So, Ron said, we still need to track down Stephen, the cat guy? Harry gave him a solemn nod. Exactly. They slipped through the dim corridors of the castle until they reached Filch's office. A cramped, windowless room lit by a single oil lamp swinging from the low ceiling. The stench of stale fish hung in the air. Every wall was lined with wooden filing cabinets, each drawer sporting a small, faded label. Fred and George had once boasted that these cabinets held records of every student Filch had ever punished, and that their own misdeeds filled an entire drawer by themselves. Harry peered closer. The 2 drawers nearest Filch's desk contained only 2 names each. In the far corner, however, one drawer bore just 4 names, surely where Stephen's would be listed. Harry's heart stuttered when he caught sight of the yellowed tag pinned to the wall. In spidery, angry scrawl it read, James Potter. The etched lines practically trembled with fury. Harry took an involuntary step back. He refused to let Filch see him staring at anything bearing his father's name. He didn't know if he could keep his composure if the caretaker chose this moment for a sarcastic remark. Today's rare private audience with Argus Filch had only come about thanks to a favor from Catman Stephen, and Harry was determined to make the most of it. With no desire to press closer, he turned his gaze instead to the wall behind Filch's desk. A neat row of gleaming manacles, cuffs, and shackles gleamed in the dim light. They were polished to a mirror shine, as if eager for immediate use, no doubt strictly forbidden by Dumbledore himself. Harry allowed himself a small private smile at the thought of the caretaker's hopes for discipline being forever unfulfilled. He was still savoring the image of Filch's frustrated disappointment when the door behind him creaked open, then slammed shut with a definitive thud. Filch appeared in the frame, shoulders hunched and eyes narrowing as he took in Harry's presence. "Harry Potter," he said, voice thick with suspicion. "So this is why you've come. Through Stephen? Spare me the theatrics. What do you want?" Harry's stomach knotted with nerves. It was the first time he'd ever been alone with Argus Filch, and oddly enough, Mrs. Norris, the caretaker's ever-present cat, was nowhere in sight. Harry studied Filch's puffy, pallid face. The man's belly poked over his belt, but his arms and legs looked almost frail in comparison. To make matters stranger, Harry found himself wondering if Filch had somehow evaded infection by the werewolf virus, only to emerge a wizard through Feniel's intervention. "Don't think you can bully me just because you're Harry Potter," Filch muttered, his voice quivering. "And don't presume this has anything to do with you or with Stephen. This is about the Weasley family's troublesome twins. They broke the rules. They'll pay the price. Stay out of it, just because you're always defending them." "I'm not doing this for Fred and George," Harry replied calmly. Filch's frown softened almost imperceptibly. They deserved to be caught and punished for flouting school regulations. Relief washed over Harry. He hadn't expected Filch to agree, and it surprised him to realize the dour caretaker genuinely cared about Stephen. After a hesitant pause, Filch asked quietly, "Then why are you involved?" Harry met his bleary gaze. "I know how it happened. You became a wizard through Feniel," he stated plainly. The caretaker's cheeks flushed bright red. Limping across the room, Filch collapsed into his desk chair, his usual bluster gone. For the first time, Harry saw Filch as something other than the grumpy, scrawny janitor. He looked almost vulnerable. Argus Filch's fingers twisted together, knuckles white as he struggled to speak. "How is this possible?" "I'm a squib," he blurted, voice faltering with each wah. He took a trembling breath, squared his shoulders, and forced his chin up. No matter. I am Rawl now, and very soon I'll be a wizard. With that declaration, the slump of his shoulders lifted as if by magic, his spine straightening with newfound confidence. A low, smooth voice echoed from the shadows. You wish to learn Fenrir's incarnation too? Filch's eyes widened in surprise. Through your channels? Chapter 426. Tartarus. Harry paused. Across the dimly lit chamber, Filch's eager expression faltered under his calm gaze. The older man had just finished laying out the old legend. To learn the Fenrir incarnation, one had to become, or at least temporarily turn into, a werewolf. Even a squib, he insisted, could rise to full wizarding power by mastering that ancient rite. Filch had been the first to break the news to Harry. You'll have no contact with your father until he dies, he'd said. He even confessed he once considered the same path, becoming a werewolf, to learn this magic. That detail startled Harry. His father, the head of the Roll family, one of the 28 sacred houses, had apparently toyed with stripping himself of humanity, if only to master Fenrir's power. If someone of his rank could contemplate such a thing, Filch reasoned, why shouldn't Harry, a mere squib until recently, do it to prove the legend true? Filch leaned forward, voice low with excitement. I'll teach you the incarnation first, he said, and then you can teach me in return. Harry held up a hand. No, he said firmly. This isn't about the Fenrir incarnation. Filch's face flushed with a mixture of pride and embarrassment. He'd expected Harry to leap at the offer. After all, who wouldn't want that forbidden knowledge? And he'd assumed Harry's recent transformation was driven by nothing more than ambition. Instead, Harry's next words cut right to the heart of the matter. It's about Roll, Harry said, meeting Filch's gaze evenly. I was a squib before all this, and I swore I'd uncover my family's secrets. For a long moment, Filch said nothing. He felt a strange pang, proud that Harry trusted him enough to bring up the Roll legacy, yet stung by the reminder of the boy's former status as a squib. Finally he nodded, stepping back into the shadows. Very well, he murmured. Tell me what you know about Roll. Harry folded his arms. I just want to know about Azkaban. Argus Filch cut him off before he could say more. On June 6, 1720, Minister Damocles Roll officially decreed Azkaban the Wizarding World's prison, placing its security in the hands of the Dementors. He delivered the date and details with an almost mechanical precision, like facts carved into his very bones. Ever since, every Roll in power has defended that choice without question. Harry leaned forward. Then why did they react so violently? Why even curse Eldritch Diggory when he, as Minister of Magic, proposed moving the prison to another site? Filch's spectacles caught the dim light as he peered down at Harry. He said nothing, but the sudden gravity in his gaze told Harry everything he needed to know. Filch harbored far more secrets about Azkaban's true purpose than he was letting on. Harry slipped quietly into the caretaker's office, careful not to disturb Mrs. Norris as she dozed by the fire. The lamplight danced across Filch's lined face, softening the usual scowl into something almost gentle. I don't know much, he began, his voice low, but I do know one thing. Every Rawl wizard, no matter how they perform at Hogwarts or how poorly their grades stack up, is said to master a singular strain of dark magic. It's unique to their bloodline. He paused, staring into the dancing embers. I'm convinced it has something to do with Azkaban. Azkaban? Harry echoed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. What could the prison possibly have to do with Rawl magic? Filch closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked decades younger. When I was a boy, my father told me that as long as Azkaban remains the Wizarding World's prison, even if there were never another prisoner within its walls, it would always radiate a power all its own. Rawl wizards draw on that power, he said. Harry watched Filch's face light up with memories. The expression was so tender, Harry realized he'd seen it before. Late at night, peering through the dormitory window with the help of his Meyer spectacles, watching Filch and Mrs. Norris share their rare moments of peace. It was a happy glow that didn't suit the surly caretaker at all. What do they call that magic? Harry asked, eager for any clue. Filch's smile faded. I wish I could tell you. I'm nothing more than a squib. I don't have the training to know the names or the secrets. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Harry frowned. Then how? Filch's eyes brightened again. Next weekend, it'll be a full moon. If I manage to secure some wolfsbane potion, under ministry supervision, of course, I'll bind the transformation to me. They say wolfsbane can protect the mind while a werewolf sheds its humanity. With that potion, I'll finally feel what it's like to be a true wizard. Harry swallowed. Isn't the wolfsbane potion strictly regulated? A squib couldn't possibly get it approved. Filch chuckled, a soft, rueful sound. I've got an ally at the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes. He owes me a favor, or so he claims. I've been a caretaker for years. I've picked up a thing or two about pulling strings. Harry rubbed his temples. First, we need to learn the name of that raw magic, and how to break its link to Azkaban. If raw wizards truly depend on that prison's power, shutting them off at the source might be the only way to stop them. Filch flicked an approving look at Harry. I like your thinking, and once you've cracked their secret, I'll be one step closer to proving I'm not just a squib. Harry nodded. Then we'd better get to work. As he stepped back into the corridor, the torches flaring along the stone walls, he felt the weight of discovery pressing on him, and the hope that, together, they might unmask a darkness older than Hogwarts itself. Monday afternoon, just after Charms class, Harry and Ron slipped into the empty spare room at the end of the fifth-floor corridor. They paced in restless circles, each waiting for Draco to arrive. Time drifted by unmarked. Outside, the bright blue sky softened toward evening, and the light in the room grew gentle and dim. At last, the heavy door swung open with a solemn thud. Draco stepped inside, his pale blonde hair catching the last rays of sun. You're finally here, Ron barked, pounding his fist on the spotless tabletop. Thanks to Hogwarts' ever-diligent house elves, even this unused room was kept pristine. Harry watched Ron's immaculate hand for a moment, his thoughts wandering, likely a side effect of boredom and long delays. Draco offered a small, contrite bow. I'm sorry I kept you waiting. Rumors of my engagement spread faster than I could stop them. Harry arched an eyebrow. Engagement? To whom? Draco ran a hand through his hair, exasperated. That's just it. I don't even know how it started. After the scandal last term, when everyone thought my affair was with you, I should have expected more wild gossip. But I never imagined that the delays at the Pure Blood banquet, thanks to those meddlesome squibs, would cause the entire wizarding world to believe I'd formally betrothed myself. Silence filled the room as Harry and Ron exchanged glances. The mystery had only just begun. Hogwarts had always been a stronghold for Pure Blood families. Nearly every Slytherin and much of the wizarding elite could trace their lineage back to its founding. Yet today, in a quiet corner of the castle, 3 students gathered over a secret that threatened to shake everything they thought they knew. Have you figured it out yet? Ron Granger Weasley demanded, shifting from foot to foot. Draco Malfoy leaned back against a stone pillar, his pale eyes glittering with amusement. Roll's secret, and the true reason Azkaban became a prison. He let each word hang in the air, relishing their curiosity. Harry Potter, still blinking away surprise, rubbed his temple. Yes, we want to know, so stop teasing and tell us. Very well. Draco pushed himself upright, but I've got more to say than just that. He glanced at Harry and Ron's eager faces. First, though, you've already heard a rumor from Filch, haven't you? That Azkaban's reputation as the ultimate wizarding prison is not because of Dementors, but because of Roll's unparalleled dark talent. Harry nodded grimly. That's what Filch muttered. He seemed terrified, too. You'd be terrified if you knew the half of it, Draco replied softly. The Malfoys have studied that branch of the dark arts for generations. It's not just awful, it's lethal. A shadow crossed Draco's features. You know what finally killed my grandfather, don't you? Ron swallowed. Dragonpox, he said cautiously. Draco's shoulders slumped. Exactly, but that scourge wasn't the only curse he fell to. He paused, as if steeling himself. My grandfather was also struck down by Roll's curse. Harry exchanged a startled look with Ron. Wait, so you're saying that, centuries ago, your ancestor Septimus Malfoy— The very same, Draco confirmed, voice low. He wielded enough influence to make the Minister of Magic his puppet, and Roll's power was at the heart of all it. Silence fell as Harry and Ron absorbed the weight of his words. In that hush, the old stones of Hogwarts seemed to pulse with hidden history and with dangers yet to come. Many regard the height of Voldemort's power as the Malfoys' finest hour. In truth, our family's golden age shone long before that Dark Lord's rise, during the first half of my grandfather's life. In those years, we carried the legacy of Septimus Malfoy and counted Voldemort himself as an ally. With unprecedented influence, even the walls of Azkaban trembled at our name. Yet power always has its price. My grandfather fell victim to a curse laid by a certain role. Voldemort avenged him, hunting down the sorcerer and then performing forbidden rituals to save Lucius's life. The healing held only for a time, however, and in his later years, my grandfather finally succumbed to dragonpox. I discovered the deeper truth of that curse on the night of my own engagement party. Sipping wine and invoking Dumbledore's legacy, I pressed a distant roll for every fragment of arcane knowledge he possessed. What he revealed was no ordinary spell, but a formless magic, an amplifier for every maleficent charm, every darkest hex. It could magnify a wizard's cruelest intentions into something monstrous. They called it Tartarus, after the pit where Zeus imprisoned the Titans in ancient Greek myth. Its architect was Damocles' Roll, the first to weave those forbidden strands into wizarding lore, and the one who nearly brought my house to its knees. The enchantment borrows the idea of Azkaban, the legendary prison for witches and wizards, and fuses it with the bitter resentment of souls who died unjustly. In effect, it projects an illusory prison within a person's body, turning that vessel into a powerful amplifier of negative magic. Moments ago, Roll reported that the very source of Tartarus energy he detected had simply vanished. Draco frowned, unable to hide his disbelief. "That can't happen," he muttered. "Dementors aren't supposed to be destroyed, and in every witch and wizard's mind, Azkaban remains an unbreakable fortress."